is already in the vicinity and will be arriving shortly. However, she has requested that we already proceed with the meeting and to be on time. So please have your seats. Before we have a round of introduction, we will be asking each one of you to introduce yourself. Let me present to you the context of our meeting. Yesterday, the Climate Change Commission hosted a focused discussion on urban and energy resilience, multi-hazard early warning systems, and climate finance at the Malacanang complex. And this was participated by some of the key national government agencies and also by the GCF mission, headed by Dr. Velasquez and Mr. Park. The focus discussion yesterday discussed and exchanged views on advancing urban and energy resilience, multi-hazard early warning systems, and climate finance in the country. The meeting also identified some possible projects that can be submitted for financing by the GCF. Today, the Office of Senator Lauren Legarda, together with the Climate Change Commission, is hosting this high-level roundtable on green finance, which assembles leaders of the finance sector to discuss and exchange views on advancing green finance in the country. This meeting will particularly present an overview of the ongoing climate finance initiatives in the country, present the available international green finance programs in the region, Asia Pacific, and recommend priority convergence actions for advancing green finance in the country, including in the areas of awareness raising, capacity building, and policy reform. Priority areas of actions identified during the regional workshop conducted by UNESCAP in Bangkok, which was participated by banking officials from Indonesia, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, and also by, from the Philippines. This afternoon, and maybe some of you will be still around, some would be resource persons. In the afternoon, we have a multi-stakeholder consultative forum on green finance. I think this would be in the two other rooms, no? Adjacent rooms. The forum is a first in a series of dialogues to be convened by the Senate Committee on Finance, together with the Climate Change Commission, as a platform for exchange of knowledge on green banking and finance. This dialogue takes stock of ongoing climate finance initiatives in the country and the available international green finance programs. It will also promote good practices in and a holistic and integrated approach to green finance in the country, and also identify priority convergence actions for advancing green finance in the country, including awareness raising, capacity building, and policy reform. So hopefully we will be able to receive some recommendations from the stakeholders here. for our ways forward. There's also provision in the law, Climate Change Act of 2009, that climate finance will have to be addressed by the central bank and also by financial institutions in the country. So I look forward to a meaningful and very interesting exchange of views this morning and also in the afternoon. Now, I hope you have a copy of the agenda for this morning's high-level roundtable. We have actually invited several resource persons from the region. We are pleased to have a representative from UNESCAP and also from the GCF, from UNEP, and our key partners here in the Philippines. UNDP is here, and I saw some of the development partners present, and we also invited CEOs from the top financial institutions in the country, which have already some green banking good practices. So you will hear from them later on. Now, before we officially start, maybe we can have a round of introduction. So I'm Manny de Guzman from the Climate Change Commission, and maybe towards my left, Cobb Noel, please introduce yourself, and then the rest. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Noel Galan of the Climate Change Commission.
Henderson Alvarez, Urge Neighbors. Good morning, Teton Mitra, Country Director, UNDP.
Morning, everyone. I'm Bobby Peralta. I'm the Secretary General of the Association of Development Financing Institutions in Asia and the Pacific.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Aneta Nikolova. I'm from United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and Pacific, from the Environment and Development Division.
Good morning. I'm Edwin Domingo from the Department of Environment and Natural Resources.
I am Jess Posadas from the Department of Energy.
Good morning. I'm Evelyn Corsada from the Office of the Cabinet Secretary.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Rochelle Tomas. I'm from the Central Bank of the Philippines.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Ray Guarin from United Nations Environment Green Climate Fund Readiness Program for Philippines.
Good morning. I'm Joanne Iala from the Bank of the Philippine Islands.
Good morning. Erwin Santa Ana, Deputy Treasurer, Bureau of the Treasury, representing National Treasurer Lea De Leon.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Jerry Velasquez. I'm the Director of Public Sector Operations at the Green Climate Fund.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Leo Pratt. I'm Financial Institution Specialist of the Green Climate Fund.
Good morning. I'm Dražen Kuchan, Senior Urban Development and Energy Efficiency Specialist with Green Climate Fund.
Good morning. My name is Joseph Insaful. I'm the Senior Climate and Early Warning Assistant Specialist of the Green Climate Fund.
Morning. I'm Binu Parthan. I'm the Regional Advisor for Asia at the Green Climate Fund.
Thank you very much. We would like the ones on the secondary table to introduce themselves also. I think there's a mobile microphone that we can lend. Is there one? Or we can just ask them to be recognized. Yes, please. Okay. Thank you very much. Senator Lauren Ricardo will join us shortly. Let me convey our grateful appreciation to all who have made it here in this meeting. Thank you so much, and we extend our warm welcome to you all. Now let me proceed with my overview to provide context for our meeting. The Senator is here. Good morning, ma'am. We just had a round of introduction.
Hello, morning.
Okay. Can we have the slides, please? Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. My presentation is on strengthening the enabling environment for climate finance towards a low carbon pathway. Next slide. As you all know, Philippines is one of the most at-risk countries, at risk to the impacts of climate change, and we have consistently been on the top list of climate vulnerable countries. Next slide. Now we take action. The government takes action, but this is not the lone responsibility of government. Climate action is everyone's business, and that's the reason why we have invited you here in this high-level dialogue. And we take note also that in our actions, although all of us are asked to do something to contribute, climate justice is at the core of our frame of actions. Okay, next slide, please. Now we have some legal basis pertinent to climate finance, and this is Section 9 of Republic Act 9729 as amended, which states that the Climate Change Commission shall establish a coordination mechanism with the concerned government agencies and other stakeholders to ensure transparency and coherence in the administration of climate funds, taking into consideration the official Philippine position in international negotiations. There's another provision which says, and this is Section 15, government financial institutions, except Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, shall, any provision in their respective charters to the contrary notwithstanding, provide preferential financial packages for climate change-related projects. In consultation with the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, they shall, within 30 days from the effectivity of this act, issue and promulgate the implementing guidelines thereof. And my understanding is there's still no guidelines in this regard. However, some banks are already into green banking practices. No? Now, through green banking and financing, climate change adaptation and mitigation and disaster risk reduction shall be mainstreamed into our systems. So we believe that green banking and finance is an agent for change. So, next slide. Okay, public and private banks could be instruments to catalyze green growth and the greening of our economy. Next slide. Now, we are also mindful that there are new global frameworks that we are adhering to. And we're just showing you 3 of them. The Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, which was adopted in March 2015 in Sendai. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, adopted in 2015 in New York. September, and also the Paris Paris Climate Change Agreement, and you're familiar with this, which was adopted in 2015 at COP21, ratified in March in the Philippines, and is now has entered into force last Earth Day. Next slide, please. Now, the Philippines is the voice of the climate vulnerable. We are still part of the CVF as a member of the Troika leadership. The CVF now is comprised of close to 50 developing nations. And you're familiar that the CVF has actually engendered the establishment of the Vulnerable 20. And this is the association of finance ministers of the CVF member nations. Okay. Now, the CVF is still a voice to consider in the fight against climate change, particularly in ensuring that global warming is limited to below 1.5 degrees Celsius. The Paris Agreement states that we will have to all endeavor to keep global warming to the level well below 2 degrees. No? The progress towards limiting global warming to 1.5 is of course contingent upon the action of all countries and the implementation of their respective nationally determined contributions. Now, we have adopted this timeline for the country. July, you've seen the holding here at the Senate of the multi-stakeholder forum for the NDCs. So the nationally determined contribution is right now being finalized with some new considerations, particularly new parameters for recalculating sectoral targets. No? So we have also moved the baseline to 2010, and the duration of the NDC plan still would extend up to 2030. No? So the sectoral training for cost-benefit analysis with the support of USAID will be conducted for the key NGAs, or key national government agencies that will take the lead in sectoral target setting, and also identification of priority actions per sector. That series of trainings will take place within this month of August. Now, in September, we are organizing a top leaders forum with the business sector to present these ways forward, particularly the progress on the And then in September, following the top leaders forum, we shall have focused discussions on the specific priority actions per sector. And hopefully by November, we have already set the recalculated sectoral targets. And we would like to finish the final version of our NDC ready for submission to UNFCCC by the end of January next year. And then on next year, there will be a series of capacity building programs in every sector, and now taking into consideration also the promotion of green jobs and just transition towards a green economy. Next slide. So the NDC shall serve as our roadmap in transitioning towards a green economy. We will provide a menu of climate change projects and programs coupled with climate finance studies. Next slide. And this is what we call the Great Transformation Challenge for all the sectors in the country. It will be a whole-of-nation movement for innovative and transformative green development of the Philippines, particularly in the areas in which we have articulated our climate actions in the NDC. And these are agriculture, waste, industry, transport, forestry, energy, and there's a plus. In the last business summit meetings, the banking sector would like to have an articulated action plan. Also, the industries, they would like to articulate also their industry climate change action plans. And also the real estate developers would like to be part of these transition planning process. No? Now, there is also a proposal during the business summit that the transition planning process adopt an ecosystem-centric framework. And these action plans will already determine sources of climate finance, whether it will be domestic or international. Okay, next slide, please. More timelines. November 2017, final sectoral emission reduction targets for 2015 to 2030 shall have been set and adopted. January, the NDC is finalized and ready for submission. February, NDC sectoral transition action plans and climate finance study finalized. And hopefully by that time when the GCF board convenes, we have already a country program submitted. The remaining months of the year until next year, we will have sectoral human resource development planning for green skills and green jobs for the period 2017 to 2022, and this is in line with our convergence with ILO and also DOLE. By the way, ma'am, there's the IRR of the Green Jobs Act is actually being finalized at the moment. DOLE is the lead agency. Okay, next slide, please. So from our consultations, there seem to be three major areas where there will be infusion of investment by all sectors. One, the area of raising awareness on green concepts and climate risks across all sectors. There is a need to bring on board everyone and put everyone on one page, common understanding of concepts and principles. And also institutionalize capacity building programs for green financing. And this came from the finance sector, this recommendation. And also to improve access to local and international climate finance. Now, in the CCC, we have launched our strategic direction under the oversight guidance of Senator Lauren Legarda. We are actually right now, pursuant to law, updating the National Climate Change Action Plan and Framework Strategy. It hasn't been revisited or reviewed or updated since the law was passed. Now we're doing it. Number two, all LGUs with shall have science and risk-based local climate change action plans, and we have started rolling this out with the major involvement of at least 39 state universities and colleges. Number 3, establishment of green job standards, accreditation, and certification system by the CCC, and we're working this out together with the ILO, because under the law, Green Jobs Act of 2016, CCC shall assume this function. Number 4, establishment of a national climate and disaster risk management information systems. This entails convergence with other government agencies with risk information mandates, mapping mandates, and also early warning mandates. So we are endeavoring to integrate all of them and provide a platform where the local government units could source their risk profile as basis for their local development planning. Last but not the least, the establishment of knowledge exchange platform for the post-2015 development frameworks and resilience building. Right now, we have a convergence with the DepEd, and they are revisiting the K-12 curriculum to include new developments like the Paris Agreement. They said they will be this new development will be integrated in social studies, climate change, new knowledge about climate change, like 1.5, will be integrated in science, etc. A green economy is possible through convergence, and this is our major approach. It will have to be a whole of government approach, a whole of society approach, a whole of nation approach. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Now I give the floor to Senator Lauren Legarda for her message.
Looks like a Senate hearing, but it's not. This is a more pleasant subject matter. Hi, Undersecretary, how are you? I will no longer acknowledge each and every one of you. I assume that before I arrived, everyone's presence has been placed on the record. The reason why I suggested that the meeting of the GCF be held here in the Senate, first is it's near the office and I have so much work as chairman of the Committee on Climate Change and Finance and Foreign Relations. We're actually starting on our work with a 3.7 trillion peso budget, which I hope all of you present here would give your inputs on how to mainstream disaster risk reduction, climate change, adaptation, and mitigation, which I already know, which I've been doing for the past few years with the Senate Legislative Budget Office, LBRMO, but there's always room for more learning. Jerry, please look at our special provisions in the 2017 budget. Mr. Park and all of you and Mr. Mitra, give us inputs on general and special provisions on how to make it really a budget that responds to the needs of our vulnerable populations insofar as climate mitigation, adaptation, and disaster risk reduction. Second, I would like to perhaps request you to help the CABSEC office, because yesterday the Office of Undersecretary Dale Cabrera mentioned that there is a disaster strategic response team. And I said, whoops, response. I think there's a lot of work, Dr. Quesada, for you to engage those new in the CABSEC office, so this is not the time for a response alone. I said that was 20 years ago. And I even said, let Manny de Guzman of Climate Change Commission and Jerry Velasquez, you previously of UNISDR, now of GCF, to help you. It was a newly created team within the CABSEC office, which is actually the secretariat of the whole cabinet. Because if the CABSEC office goes only response-oriented, here we are going 20 years ago in the government in trying to make them understand DRR. But let me go straight to the point on climate finance. While I read the program for the whole morning and this afternoon, and I'll be in and out because of our work here in the Senate, first, we need to inventory the climate finance resources in every agency of government. So my question is, who is doing that for us? It should be the Department of Finance. Do we have a representative in the DOF here?
I am representing
okay.
National
You're the
Treasurer.
Deputy Treasurer. Thank you for being here. So I'm not sure, I don't see it here in the program. Are you ready to tell us on the list of climate finance mechanisms, processes, and resources within the whole governmental body? What I'm referring to, for example, is in the DNR, and the focal person or agency or bureau for each. For example, we're only talking about GCF now, and the NDA is a DNR, and it's in transition because of the new secretary. Are you also familiar, of course, with the GEF? Are you familiar with, what are the other climate finance? Oh, take out that ugly picture. Okay. Anyway, so do we actually have an inventory of all climate finance sources in every agency of government? So don't be scared. If you don't have it now, that's fine. But I would expect you to have it at 1 o'clock when we resume. Are you ready to tell us now, Deputy Treasurer? Because you're the Treasurer. If I'm a Treasurer, I should know what's available. And who, which is available with DNR? Who's DNR here? Yes. Okay, Mr. Domingo. So you should actually be working with Mr. Domingo. Could you kindly answer me? What are the climate finance resources available in DNR, and so far as DNR is concerned? And then after that, DA, DOF, etc., then all of that. So we have a pool, and we know the focal person, and we know what projects have been funded by this climate finance. What is the name of the lady in Washington, the Japanese lady? No, that's GEF, no? The lady in Washington. GEF. DNR is GEF. Adaptation Fund. Ang dami eh. Yes. So let me ask the Treasurer first. Sorry, I'm like translating this into a committee hearing because that's how it should be. It should not be just one-sided. And I want to know. That's the first step that we should be talking about. And then we zero in the GCF, because GCF is just one of many. So Mr. Santana, do you in the Treasury actually know all available sources of climate finance? Are you as Treasurer monitoring everything? Or maybe I'm asking the question of the wrong person, and kindly point me to the right agency in government who is responsible for this. So I need to talk to that person or that agency and give me a briefing. That's what the opening should have been. Ito ang lahat ng inventaryo. Ito ang mga departamento. Ito ang mga tao. Ito na ang nakuha natin. Ganun dapat. This is what we have. This is what's ongoing. This is a status of projects. And this is what we will do. Then we zero in on GCF. Yes, Mr. Santa Ana. If you're new and if you don't know, or if that's fine, just be ready with it this afternoon. If you're not ready this afternoon, then within the week. But that's very important that as Chairman of Finance, I know the sources of climate finance. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Senator. I don't have the information right now because we from the Bureau of the Treasury are, of course, the fund mobilizer of government. No? So we are the ones who actually generate funds, both from domestic and international sources. The point person for this one, and the agency that is supposed to come up with the inventory is really the Department of Finance, the department itself. I'm sure we have a list of those climate finance sources available. The responsible group there, I believe, is the International Finance Group, which I will coordinate with during the course of this forum.
Could we ask CCCOM, who organized this event, was the International Finance Group of the DOF actually invited?
Madam Senator, yes. The invitation went through Secretary Dominguez himself, and then Secretary Dominguez assigned to National Treasurer De Leon, and then they are both in the DBCC budget hearing at the House, so they sent me to represent.
Understood. So if Secretary Sonny actually received this invite and he actually assigned you, should have been prepared to come up with that list, because you should have anticipated that I would have asked that. if because I'm in touch with him and he knows in fact that we transferred the PSF to the DOF because I wanted to see the DOF, what the DFF has. Because there may be some sources of finance which is not moving. Sayang. It's a waste if you don't access it. So never mind. If you're not ready now, if you could have the information from your international finance group in the DOF and by 1 o'clock, are you going to join us 1 o'clock?
Personally, no.
But somebody from DOF must be here at 1 o'clock.
I will tell them.
Between now and 12 noon when you're here. It's just a matter of, it may even be in the website. Can somebody check from your office? Yes, I'll get back to you. Reserve that information. I need to have it before 12 noon, if you can. If not, within the day, please. That's very important. Second, Mr. Domingo, insofar you're representing DNR in the international foreign assisted projects, yes. Insofar as DNR is concerned, what are the sources of climate finance?
We are currently finalizing the inventories right now, and as you said, what is very important there are also the processes and the focal person. And in addition to what you have mentioned, ma'am, right now because we are focused namin at the GEF, no?
Okay, GEF is under DNR. What else are the other sources?
And then the other bilateral agreements that we are working also with CCC, like the BMU IKI facilities, no? And then, of course, with the USAID and the multilateral banks, like the Montreal Protocol have also some fundings to their council, no? So we're working on all of this.
What we need to do,
just an addition, ma'am, it might not be known to a lot of people that there's also a lot of locally available sources right now through various foundations. We're also keeping touch of this now.
The locally funded climate finance sources, example?
Like for example, the Oscar Lopez Foundation has some money right now. The Management Association of the Philippines.
Oh, they're always asking for money.
Yeah, and then
local foundations ask for money or try to generate funds also through domestic sources and international. Do they actually give money?
But we're tracking also. We're also tracking because of the spatial and thematic relationship to some of our.
Okay. May I please request? You're the director of the Foreign Assisted Projects headed by Yusek Leones, correct? Where is he? This is so important. He should be here. I saw him last Sunday in UP.
Yeah, he's with the secretary for some out-of-town inspection.
Okay. So that's fine. Could we also request from DENR, please? And I'm requesting or instructing the Secretariat of the Senate Committee on Finance to please ask every government agency to give us all the sources of climate finance and then put it together. DOF will help us, but the Senate will also ask so that we have not just DNR, perhaps Undersecretary Posadas, to your knowledge, I know you're new in the DOE now, is there any source of climate finance in the DOE? I know that the EU fund has something for C2 electrification, which has its base in the DOE complex.
Yes, Madam. I confirm that we access that EU fund, Sustainable Energy for All. Also, we also access the USB leaders, USAID as source. Basically, those are the ones that I know, Madam.
So I'm requesting the DNR, the DOE, and all agencies of government and the DOF to put it together for the Committee on Finance and the Committee on Climate Change. Now, we proceed with the subject matter for today, which is the Green Climate Fund, and to actually engage local stakeholders on climate finance and how our banks can actually transform themselves into accredited institutions for climate finance. Let me also put on record that the National Designated Authority of the Philippines is the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. I would just like to confirm with the GCF Secretariat if this is already clear or if there is any conflict, because last year it was the Climate Change Commission. Since early part of this year it was moved to the DNR, and there's a GCF secretariat supposedly within the DNR. However, there's also been a change both of the CCCOM and the DNR of its heads, and so we'd like to know whether the GCF secretariat is aware of the transfer of NDA and of the change of the secretary of DNR and the focal person for the GCF secretariat in the DNR. May I just know from the GCF, just so that we're clear? Is it
Yes,
Jerry or
we actually received a formal communication from the government of Philippines telling us that the DNR and the new Secretary Simatu is the focal point, the NDA. And yesterday we met with Secretary Simatu, and we were told that Undersecretary Te is our focal point.
Just yesterday, because last weekend when I saw them, no order was giving it, but Anna told me that she will be in charge, and I hope we speed up because the other countries, and I will meet separately with USECTE. She's not present today on Davao. Kindly, again, this is an official invitation for the focal person of the DNR to see the chairman of the Committee on Finance and Climate Change with the relevant persons who are already briefed on GCF, so that I just want to see where we are. Yes, so that's where we are. We're actually starting from start in a way, because it's a new secretary of DNR, it's a new team in GCF, and where are we in so far as submitting proposals, or are we just building capacity for the GCF secretariat of the DENR? Who is going to answer that? Okay, maybe I'll address my question, please, to the GCF. Have you received any proposals or project proposals from the Philippines, from any agency from the Philippines? First, we've established an NDA. Second, land bank. There's a, what is it? Do we already have an NIE? First, are we able to access, is there any proposal from the Philippines to GCF? Second, do we have an NIE that's accredited? Third, are we able to access funds or have our proposals accepted even without an accredited NIE? Those are basic questions I need to know, because land bank is pending. I want to know where are we at insofar as NIE of land bank. Second, have you actually in the previous DNR secretary's term received any proposals for GCF funding from any government agency? B8, Department of Agriculture claims they submitted. The former secretary of DNR claims they submitted. I want to know, did GCF actually accept it, duly received and moving? Because if you tell me now nothing has been submitted, then the DA and DNR, when they claim they have submitted their projects, it didn't land in Korea. It probably went to North Korea, not South Korea. Okay, so.
Thank you very much, Madam Senator. So we have received so far 2 concept notes submitted to us. One submitted what we call the Enhanced Direct Access, $20 million, submitted by Land Bank. It's supposed to help accelerate the accreditation of Land Bank. Land Bank's accreditation is in its final stages. So I think at the moment it's just the final review, and hopefully either this year or early next year they will get accredited.
That's different. That is to capacitate Land Bank as a national implementing entity, as an NIE, the $20 million. Is that correct?
It's actually a flexible fund that the Land Bank can use to finance sub-projects, small sub-projects. We're not actually looking at the details of the sub-projects. We're just giving them a $20 million grant to actually, and they could use it, not necessarily fully grant, it could be also a revolving fund, could be a loan.
Good. So the $20 million to be granted to Land Bank by this year, you say, Dr. Velasquez, or first quarter of next year, is not for the readiness of Land Bank as an NIE, but for them to use for micro enterprises, for example, for vulnerable populations like farmers and fisher folks, which is their mandate. Because sometimes this land bank, they keep on lending to the big guys, to those already rich. They're not, I'm not saying all, they do not. Just yesterday, we were talking among us and senators, even the Development Bank of the Philippines, you see them lending to the wealthy taipans, which should not be the case. In fact, I will file a resolution to look into the mandate of the Land Bank of the Philippines and the Development Bank of the Philippines and see lahat ng pinautang nila kung sino ang mayayaman na bilyonaryo at bakit yun ang pinapautang, hindi ang mahihirap na magsasaka at mangingisda. Dapat ang pinupondohan ng Land Bank, for example, yung mga climate resilient communities sa proposal ni Director Ilaga ng DA, ganyan. Tinutulungan ba kayo ng Land Bank? Yung mga syudad o mga rural communities na pinakita nyo sa akin, DA, yan ba ang pinupondohan ng Land Bank? Hindi eh. Baka puro yung mga bilyonaryo na, ganun. Kasi, you know, the reason is, it's not easy to comply with bank requirements. Yan. So, that is the building of capacity we also need. So, I'm glad to hear that you have a $20 million grant. I would like to know if you can tell me now what is it for, but maybe Land Bank should also tell us where they intend to use it. Kapapautangan na naman sa isang bilyonaryong taipan, sayang naman ng, that's not the intent. So please, when you lend it, if I may, can you have very strict TOR that they only lend it for vulnerable populations, maybe indigenous people, but even not, for farmers and fisher folks, for climate resilience, and projects we can actually smell, see, and feel that will have transformed lives in the grassroots. Yun. Does that comply with your grant of 20 million?
It's still a concept note, Madam Senator, and after, what we are hoping is that after their accreditation, they could submit the full funding proposal. We've also received another concept note from DNR, $78 million for bamboo and mangrove plantation.
Good. So it's been received.
It's a concept note received.
Okay. Just walk me through. If it's a concept note already received, and we don't have an accredited NIE, what is the next step, Jerry?
So the process is that either the National Designated Authority sends us a concept note or an accredited entity. In this case, you don't have Land Bank accredited yet, so you could partner with internationals like UNDP, the World Bank, ADB, IFC, even private entities that are accredited with us. We have 54 of them. And the concept note, once approved, of course, needs to be endorsed by the NDA. If there is a necessity, the entity could also request for project preparation, up to 1.5 million for a particular project, to do feasibility studies and so on. After that is completed, they could then submit a full project to us.
Those two concept notes of the Land Bank of $20 million and the DNR of $78 million for bamboo and for mangroves, when is it going to be assessed by the board, or should it mature into a full proposal?
We've already provided comments on the DNR proposal, and for the Land Bank proposal, Land Bank needs to complete its accreditation. So once it completes accreditation, it can submit the full proposal.
Great. Where are we at, and what is missing with the Land Bank accreditation? Because I heard that from last year.
I think it's just now they've paid, it's the last step, they've paid now the accreditation fee, and I think now it's a final review by our accreditation panel. It's probably going to come in the coming months.
Oh, good. So perhaps within the year, we will have an NIE, and that's Land Bank.
Land Bank.
Very good. And in the meantime, we don't have that. Just in case you approve, let's say, the DNR proposal, they can partner with an already accredited of the 54 NIEs that are present in the Philippines or abroad, correct? Yes.
We have half of those 54 are national institutions, like in India and so on and so forth, and the other half are internationals.
International, yes. But the problem with this 54, sometimes, Tito Mitra said hello. Yes, you charge too high admin fee. That's why I want to see the 54 who can give me the report, CCCOM. No, I'll be we have to call a spade here. I want to see the 54 and the admin fees they charge, and who has the lowest charge admin fee. You know, we're doing this. This is not a business. We're helping the poor. I want to see the money go to the Filipino people. I'm not saying it should not go to consultants who are helping us, but we want to see it changing lives in the grassroots. It should not just go to travel and five-star hotels and all of this, which is part, hotels and travel is part of it. But we see the admin fee also of consultants, liitan nyo, para papunta sa tao. That's just my suggestion. I'm not saying it's NDP, UNDP. It's just the comments I hear from other people, so I'm putting it on the table. I know Eve is giggling. Yes. You invited me, so, you know, when you invite me, I call a spade a spade. And these are the issues I hear, which maybe should be. So we have to shop around for the best partner institution that has the lowest admin cost, that will act as fast as needed, as if it was an emergency situation. Not 2-3 years, not 1 year, fast. And who can do complete staff work at the least cost and deliver the goods to the poor people. That is the TOR that we need for a partner. In the meantime, we would appreciate the land bank getting accredited. I've said too much. So, what I need from DNR, I'm sorry, is your proposal are mangroves and bamboo. That's good for resilience. But you already have how much? Over 10 billion allocated all throughout the years. No, how much? 12 billion from the National Greening Program. So what I need to see, I'm like acting like GCF. But they don't know what I know, which is the funding we've given you for how many billions of the GCF. I want to see your bamboo and mangroves from the beginning of the NGP to the present year. So that means I will lessen your NGP budget because you asked for $78 million for bamboo and mangroves, because unless it's really needed. But in Region 8, for example, I hear that there's so much money for mangroves that you even plant mangroves where they're not supposed to be mangroves to be planted, with the seagrass beds. Seagrass bed, nagtatanim ng mangrove. So, sobra-sobra na. So, we want to rationalize the utilization of our resources, and I want to see how different is your mangrove proposal pending with GCF, and does it overlap with the NGP mangrove and bamboo projects. But I'm in favor of bamboo and mangroves, and in fact, if you could target all the coastal municipalities, how many are there around the country? 822 coastal municipalities, if I'm not mistaken. We have 1,634 LGUs. We have 822 in the whole 30 million hectares of archipelago in our country. If you could focus that $78 million for bamboo and mangrove for this 820, or if you want, focus on this area, Pasig River for bamboo, mangroves could be the Manila Bay region or Laguna de Bay. But I leave it to the experts to see where are the best locations for this. So those are my interventions. I did not read welcome remarks. This can be just download my speech. It's important that number one, we receive from DOF through Mr. Santa Ana the whole climate finance availability in every department. Second, I request Yusek Posadas and Mr. Domingo and all those agencies. Director Elaga is here, DA. So sagot mo na, Alice, ang DA, ha? Lahat ng available climate finance. Yes. And then DNR and the other agencies not represented can submit it to us. And then Land Bank is not represented, but we have BPI. Land Bank. Yes, yes. Kayo po ang nag-shepherd ng inyong NI requirement. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I hope that we could have Land Bank approved this year. Kung ano pang kulang nyo, baka may mga requirements pang kulang. Sige, I'll stop talking and listen to you. Yes. Thank you. Dr. Nikolova, UNESCO. Thank
no,
you.
I'm from UNESCAP, from the Economic and Social Commission. Yes, from the Economic and Social Commission of Asian Pacific. Senator Lagarde, I'm very privileged to be here. I've heard so much about you, and now I'm completely.
Bad or good?
Sorry?
I said bad or good.
Fantastic. That energy, we rarely have this chance at the regional commissions to have this chance to be really seeing people with that energy and doing so much good work. I just want to make one small remark. This is wonderful what you're doing. You're pulling all the government financing and you're getting mapping and a good picture of it. I just need to tell you that the banks, to be working properly, I think we need to empower our dear friends from the central bank, because the central bank is the regulator of the financial flows. As you're regulator of the government flows and the work, they're the regulator of the financial sector. And I think in our countries in Asia Pacific, the developing countries are still figuring it out. And that's why we have this project to help a targeted group, and Philippines is among them. So I think what you could also do is to create a spin as well for that work, so without the guidelines, the greening of the financial system at the national level, the guidelines that should come from the central bank, maybe certain of the lending things, a lot of the interest can be covered in different way. A lot of the issues that you're pointing out, that money do not reach the poor or the ones, the farmers in need or the fisheries, can be settled down through these guidelines as well. So we are ready to help, and I'm sure our colleagues from UNDP and also GCF and other agencies, IFC, are ready to help here, behind us here. So.
Dr. Aneta, I'd just like to know, I see in this afternoon's program, the banks are not present. So when are we going to have all the banks, or were the banks not invited, only BPI? May I know whether all banks were invited? For example, just answer, who did the invites? Do we have another session with all the banks?
That's the afternoon session, Madam Chair.
The afternoon session, I see. Because I don't see, they will be present. They're not part of the presentations, but banks were invited for this afternoon session.
That's intended for them.
Good. The local banks. Okay. Because I cite, for example, BPI. Again, not to put you in a spot. You're supposed to be a green bank. And there's, when you lend, may I just ask the banks, and then I'll stop talking and listen to you. When you lend to a renewable energy project, ayan, nandiyan si Yusek Posadas, a startup, let's say, with no history of borrowing, it's not very encouraging in this country because you always ask for a REM. Bakit ganun? If you really want to push, so let's not call it green financing. If you ask for a real estate collateral, hindi yun, hindi ba?
Yes.
May I just know, is that only BPI or all banks would need a real estate collateral for that? So that's not green finance.
You know,
you don't believe in the project if you do that, right?
Okay, so on behalf of BPI, I guess, and I would think all private banks for that matter, because yes, the requirement of a collateral is like a sacred rule across all banks, except of course if we are a government bank or if we have a funding specializing in new projects, because in fact, as a rule, we even require 3 years of positive financial performance, experience, at least 1 year experience of the proponents.
So it's not just renewable energy.
Yes.
Now, of course, I know, I borrowed from banks, small loans, lahat kailangan ng collateral. My question is, if there's already cash flow, but still, a collateral is still required by BPI. I know it for a fact. Why is that? Don't you give green financing or renewable energy projects or anything that would benefit environment and the people just through the project itself? Everything has to be collateralized by real estate?
Not everything has to be collateralized by real estate, but it depends on a per project basis how cash flow projections are based. So well, that's part of of every banking business, lending business. Cash flow analysis is the key, is the source of payment of the project predictable enough and would not put the project on the line. Because at the end of the day, of course, we need the project to be very, very stable, and we don't want any possible foreclosures. We don't want that. What we want is, and we in fact discourage project proponents who may have been seen to be a bit on the aggressive side. Yes, in terms of say if they're green projects, if I may give us an example, those who were running after the second fit, so many of them wanted to join the race, which is first come first serve. And how many did we have to discourage, even if they're giving us collateral, REM, real estate mortgage? No? We are still telling them, you see, at the end of the day, if you cannot have a predictable source of money to pay the banks, then you are at risk. And would rather be very frank and discourage proponents from. We are a very conservative bank.
Understood.
Yes.
So there is no bank in the country that would actually lend without a real estate collateral of sustainable investments. Is that my question? What I'm trying to say is that, for example, Morgan Stanley is not a bank, the investment arm, investment bank, but they have the Sustainable Investing with Impact program, where they even invested in a project. In what part of Africa was that, Rachel? Where? In Nigeria. They invested in a project in Nigeria that would create local community-based manufacturing and no, I guess the cost-benefit analysis, it was a big risk to do that. So you don't do that. I can't, what is the name? It's not renewable energy. It was a local manufacturing of some kinds. I can't recall it now. They call it the impact. Have you studied that? The impact program of Morgan Stanley. I forget the name of the head. I met her in New York some time back, and they were telling me about sustainable financing, sustainable investment financing with impact. No collateral. Of course, this poor community in Nigeria don't have anything to give insofar as real estate collateral is concerned. But because they were very poor and they were importing, so malaki ang carbon footprint. A lot of a certain produce, they encouraged the local community to produce it, which generated jobs and eliminated the big carbon footprint. Mm-hmm. So I'm just looking at banks that actually do that. Maybe not BPI because you're a commercial bank. That's what BBP, I think, and Land Bank should be doing. Yes. But BPI, for example, I think if there's a sustainable project and there's already cash flow, there shouldn't be real estate anymore, because insofar as renewable energy projects are concerned.
It's a case-to-case basis.
It depends on the project.
Yes,
okay,
it depends
fine.
on
I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, it depends on the viability of the project. But the model of BPI is this: what we give for free are technical services, free technical assistance, especially to new projects whose proponents are not very familiar yet with what they want to do. But when we analyze that the plans are really technically viable and at the end of the day would really yield the cash flow that is projected, then we proceed. But of course, still, we need to make sure that first it's done the proper way, and then there is indeed money that's going to happen. At the end of the day, it's always profitability, and that's the business model of the Sustainable Energy Finance team of BPI. We give you that free technical assistance to help make sure that the project will succeed.
Of course.
So, because we don't want it to fail. In fact, to date, there's only one failure that has happened, and it was only because the pig producer didn't follow the plan to begin with, diverted the funds. So, but everybody else, 267 projects at that, everybody else is doing well. and that is very, very low in terms of NPL ratio across the whole banking industry, and that is because of the fact that there was handholding. Of course, thanks to IFC, they helped us provide these technical consultants. BPI financed that, and in fact, that's what we want. We have to tell this body. As a private bank, I don't have funding for this. I have to survive on my own. So the things I do have to be profitable on its own. But if there could be some kind of funding that can help me go down market, meaning go to the countryside, just like how USAID helped us in the past, there was a guarantee of 50%. IFC also has a guarantee of 50% for a certain cost. So there's an added buffer to the interest rate charged to the project proponents, so that if they cannot borrow from a bank, they can still do so because of the guarantees.
It's okay. I can, in fact, Mr. Constantino, Red, you can ask your question yourself. You share my microphone and you can ask BPI, because that's the point of this. It's not just one way. Your questions can be asked. We put on record the presence of Red Constantino of the Institute of Sustainable Cities. Yes.
Thanks, Madam Senator. The question is really that if about project financing, because we think it does not require collateral, but maybe we just have a different understanding. The question really is, why isn't BPI financing RE with project financing? If the answer is yes, then this is good, because then it's time to scale this up very quickly. And if not, why not? What's the problem? Thanks, ma'am.
Yeah. There are several project finance loans, no, they're released by BPI already, but I must say they are for bigger projects. I can show some later. And why is that? There are several proposals, but it's not ready. I mean, it's not something that BPI can be comfortable with. There are several proponents who have approached us, but yeah, cash flow projection wise, there is a problem. But to your question, were there project finance initiatives done by BPI? Yes.
I'm tempted to say something, but maybe
Madam Senator?
I'll just cite a project. BPI. Okay, I might as well say it. I won't say where. There's cash flow. There's a PSA, there's a bilateral contract, and there's cash flow. It was applied for before the project was completed. It's been completed for 3 years, so there's cash flow, there's a monthly collection. Still, the collateral, the REM, has not been taken out by BPI because they said it's not enough. But per the computation, the cash flow of the renewable energy project is more than enough. That's my point. We're all for profit. That's not wrong. We're all for profit. But how can we actually, sa simula, that's okay. When you're a startup, when you're not known, when you don't have the 3 years, that's fine. But pull it out when the project is completed. That's what Red is saying, right? Project finance, you pull out the REM because there's already cash flow, natayo na yung proyekto at meron ng monthly payments. Ayaw pa rin tanggalin. BPI ito.
Madam Senator?
Maybe Ms. Jo will not be in a position to answer that because you don't know what I'm referring to. But this is a case in point of BPI. And I can go into other banks. Sa simula, naglagay ng REM. Natayo yung proyekto.
Yeah.
Matagumpay, merong buwan-buwan na cash flow, hindi pa rin tinatanggal yung REM. So, hindi ito green financing. Nakabaon yung REM eh.
I'm not privy to the details of
Later,
that.
I'll tell you after
yes,
this. Yes.
But
that's what you're trying to say, right?
Yeah.
If it's project finance, bakit kailangan? You're not really encouraging green financing then.
Well, I'm not privy to the details, but you see, at the end of the day, what happens to the bank is that we have a separate credit team and a separate...
It would be unfair to hold you onto that because you're not
Yeah.
familiar. In fact, the project I'm referring to is even an IFC awardee. BPI got the IFC award. IFC probably didn't know that BPI required a big REM for the project. So, I'm not trying to embarrass BPI, but that's what Red is saying. Pag, it received an award, but the real estate is still there.
At the end of the day, always, when we, even as we do sustainable energy finance, we respect the credit team's assessment of each project, and whatever is their assessment as to the viability, the financial viability, or the level of comfort of the credit committee is on a project is what is followed. So, or, you know, there are sometimes that we support a certain project, but at the end of the day, if we find that the proponent is spreading himself too much or too thinly, and then we want him to slow down, we also do the same, and we send that message that way.
Okay.
So yeah, but at the end of the day, we do have experts inside.
What do you handle in the bank?
Well, I handle the sustainable energy finance team, whereby I head the team whereby we provide technical assistance, and that's how we support. Our sweet spot is in the lower end, but it's still mid. It's not
Can you kindly tell us one project that you finance for sustainable energy under your team?
There are so many.
Without real estate collateral. Everything has real estate collateral.
SMEs, small to medium-sized businesses, all of them have real estate collateral, or some other sources of income which could secure them and protect them from being foreclosed. So what does my team do? We provide technical assistance, and then those who cannot qualify because of lack of REM, we have partnerships originally, but we have fully utilized USAID. We still have an ongoing partnership with IFC, whereby IFC guarantees 50% of the loan, and then there's a fee that we have to tuck into the interest of the client, which we disclose to the client, and then we say, because of IFC's help, because of that 50% guarantee, even if you don't have real estate, then we can lend to you. So, and because of that, IFC is of course zero risk rated, then the clients can continue. But there is no project under my team without technical support provided first, and which evaluates the project.
I'll just get your contacts and I'll inform you later what I'm referring to.
Madam Senator,
Yes.
I may be able to answer your question. I am from Amana Islamic Bank, and we do finance green projects without collateral.
Really?
Yes.
How much is your capitalization?
Actually, we will probably, as chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, will probably see you. We are a very small bank, but we are a government bank. Let me just illustrate how we do it.
I've heard of
Amana
the bank
Islamic
a long
Bank.
time ago, pero
Yes.
parang I thought it was
No.
inactive.
No, it's just small. But let me illustrate. Big and small projects in Davao. I'll just show you. This is an actual. We have an actual client. What she does is. It's all right. No, it's.
Pangalan po nila?
Alex Bangcola po.
You're the newly appointed chairman.
Newly appointed chairman CEO.
You're from Davao.
I'm from Mindanao. I'm from Marawi City.
Oh, very good.
In fact, I'm going to discuss. We have three green projects in Marawi. We have a solar project, a biomass, and the Agus tree. These are all renewables. We are helping package this without collateral through the use of sukuk, Islamic bonds. Okay, this is non-collateral based. But unfortunately, you know what's happening in
So
Marawi.
this is just a concept. It's not yet being implemented.
It is being implemented. Exactly. I'm going to describe to you how we finance a coffee grower in Davao. This is an existing client. What she does, she has an accreditation from the Department of Agriculture. She grows coffee, the seedlings. After 3 weeks, she delivers this to the Department of Energy, Department of Agriculture, and she gets paid. Okay, so we finance this. This was like last month. I just signed a small loan, so just for 5 million, No collateral at all. It's basic. Our basis is basically the cash flow that comes from the contract with the Department of Agriculture. So we're fine so far. Anybody who's interested in this can talk to us. I'll give you my card.
Secretariat to put the gentleman's name, please, and what he represents. Yes. Just a...
I'll give you, please. I think this is an opportunity to say to the senator that I learned banking from your late mother. Yeah, I worked with her. PNB. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
You're a friend of my late mother, and Undersecretary Jess is a friend of my father. Correct?
I know
Kaya malambot ang
Undersecretary
puso ko sa kanya eh. Lahat ng hearing, maski nagagalit na ako sa lahat ng ahensya, pero pagdating kay Yusek Jess, malambot kaibigan ang tatay ko.
I worked with your mother in the old PNB Buendia branch, if you remember the circular.
Oh, she was from PNB Escolta.
Yeah.
I used to fetch her every day.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we will talk about, I'd like to support the Amana Islamic Bank.
Yes, ma'am. We'll see you,
Yes,
for sure. We'll be seeing
your government.
We are government.
Capitalization comes from
The government.
the government.
Our majority shareholder is now the Development Bank of the Philippines.
DBP.
Yes.
So do you get your funding, your capitalization from the General Appropriations Act or from DBP's?
It's a one-time infusion from DBP. Yes.
Okay,
But
can you just prepare, maybe not for here since we're veering away, but it's all very interesting. Just give me a presentation of the Amana Islamic Bank.
We will.
I think
Yes,
Secretary Dominguez made a suggestion to increase its capitalization, to make it more active, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Is it also the ABAC Chair Alcantara, Tommy, was interested in doing something
Before? Yes.
Yes. I'd like to support that because, in
you,
fact, let's talk about Marawi rehabilitation and more projects in Mindanao. Sustainable.
We are one of only 3 banks with actual branches in Marawi. The other 2 being land
Hindi
bank.
pa kayo sinasabog? Buo pa? Nandun yung building
Buo pa po,
na?
yung building namin. We're still fine. In fact, there was an attempt to get, enter land bank. I think they did, and then PNB. But we are all right. We're safe. Yeah.
Please give me that presentation on a later date or this afternoon. Red, is there some intervention you'd like to, just so that we... Kuha naman si Ms. Jo, she's the representative of Land Bank. She may not answer all our questions about credit, but your last statement, Red. Okay.
Thanks, Madam Senator. Well, the only thing I wanted to say is that if it's project financing, you should not require real estate collateral because it should be based on future revenue. And so when you say that all your SMEs require real estate collateral, then there's a problem.
Yes, they're not on a project finance basis. As I mentioned
so they're
earlier,
not on project finance
the
basis.
SMEs are not, yes. But we do have several project finance engagements, but these are big, as I mentioned earlier. They're generally on the large side. The ones that we do under my team are not project finance.
They're not project finance, but project finance dapat walang collateral. Anyway, we'll leave it at that. Manny, can you please proceed as the moderator? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We immediately proceed to the presentations. We have several, and as agreed, this presentation will only each presentation will run for 5 minutes. So let's observe this. May I now call on the Acting Deputy Director of Inclusive Finance Advocacy Staff of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, Rochelle Tomas.
Thank you, Commissioner. And the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas is glad to be here and be part of this conversation. So my presentation will focus on financial inclusion. At first glance, it might not be very related to climate finance, but you will see later on some tangential relationship. The Commissioner earlier mentioned the convergence in his first slide, and so I will begin also with convergence and tell everybody that we have a national strategy for financial inclusion. That is a high-level document that describes the strategy of the Philippine government to pursue financial inclusion in the Philippines. So we have four components of this strategy. We have first policies and regulations. We also have financial education and consumer protection. We have advocacy programs, all underpinned by data and measurement. And the ultimate objective is really to towards broad-based, sustainable, and inclusive growth. 15 agencies are implementing the National Strategy for Financial Inclusion, and all of them are listed here. The chairman is the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. We call all of these agencies the Financial Inclusion Steering Committee, so all the heads are members of this committee, and Executive Order 208, dated June 2, 2016, was the one that empowered all of these agencies to implement the national strategy. Now, each of these agencies have their own tactical plans, which they implement. Tactical plans meaning specific, measurable, time-bound programs that they will contribute to achieve financial inclusion goals. So implementation is currently ongoing. Monitoring and evaluation is done by the BSP as both the chair and the secretariat of this Financial Inclusion Steering Committee. And once the first report comes out, we will review the accomplishments and probably revise the tactical plans. I just wanted to highlight that the definition of financial inclusion as well, and we define financial inclusion as a state where there is effective access to a wide range of financial products and services by all Filipinos. And by all Filipinos, we mean all the unbanked and the underserved sectors. And the strategy highlights the need to also target people in the climate vulnerable areas, and that is very, very explicit in the strategy. So by effective access to a wide range of financial products and services, we mean all types of products, not just credit, but also savings, payments, insurance, remittances, and investments. And we would want effective financial inclusion for our people, to empower them, for them to have access, use those financial services, and these financial services are of good quality so that eventually it can affect their financial well-being. Why is financial inclusion important? We all know that financial inclusion is a key enabler for us to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. So out of the 17 goals, we have about 7 of them prominently say that financial inclusion can help achieve those goals. So in terms of, in the Philippines, the financial inclusion goals are also supportive of the inclusive growth agenda, both in the Philippine Development Plan 2011 to 2010 and in the current Development Plan 2017 to 2022. So financial inclusion, again, can be an enabler for us to achieve Ambition 2040. Now, this is just an illustrative case of why financial inclusion is important. A small business owner having access to a small loan can improve her business, and eventually the profits can be turned into financing for children's education, for homes, for health of the family, and eventually impact their household's well-being. Now, again, I think in the Philippines, financial inclusion is very, very critical, because most of those that are highly vulnerable to climate change in the coastal areas are poor, and we would want them to be able to access savings and other financial services when they become vulnerable. And based on current data, and this is based on the mapping done by the Central Bank of the Philippines, while we are an archipelago, it seems that in terms of access to financial services, there are a lot of different types of financial institutions that can help our people. So even if 36% of our LGUs do not have any banks, if we include in the data all the pawn shops, electronic e-money service providers, other financial service providers like co-ops and microfinance NGOs, only 14% of the LGUs will not be served. So this data is based on a demand-side survey. This poses more challenges. So even if access is not a perennial problem for us, usage is still very low. For example, 43% of the 68% of adults who save at home. Sorry, 43% of Filipino adults who save money, of the 43% who save money, 68% save at home. Of the 47% of adults who borrow money, 72% of them borrow from informal sources with high interest rates. So why is the BSP involved in financial inclusion? So while there is a national strategy for financial inclusion already in place, the BSP spearheaded the process of its development, and this is because we believe that financial inclusion is complementary to our mandate, and it aligns well with our vision, which is a financial system that delivers a high quality of life for all Filipinos. It's also consistent with our mission to have to support a balanced economic growth. Now this is just this is just the timeline of our involvement in financial inclusion. It began when microfinance was mainstreamed as an activity in the banking sector way back in 2000 under the General Banking Law. And we have issued so many regulations that encourage our banks to lend or to provide financial services to our excluded populations. So all of these are here. We have a credit risk management framework that allows them to assess cash flows, not require collateral. Those regulations are already in place, and the process actually began way back in 2002. Our approach to financial inclusion is really a strategic objective, and we always try to balance both inclusion as an objective, but also ensuring that the financial institutions remain stable, they remain free from being used as channels for fraud, and that the consumers are protected. And so all our regulations are geared towards balancing all of these objectives. Our vision for financial inclusion, we have a diverse, well-designed, suitable, value-adding products and services to our target markets. Providers are also diverse, so we encourage the partnerships of banks and non-banks in providing such services. They should be responsive and responsible. They can innovate products and services. If it's for climate finance, they can innovate project financing methodologies that will ensure that they provide the right services and affordable services to their clients. And we also encourage consumer protection and a financially literate population, because we believe that financial education and a financially literate population can contribute well to the economy. So this is just a slide that shows you that financial inclusion is at the top of our mandate. The governor heads the Inclusive Finance Steering Committee, and he heads only 3 committees in the central bank. It's Financial Stability and Monetary Stability Committee. So this just highlights that so many units in the bank are championing financial inclusion already, and we all work together and contribute to this goal. This is a snapshot of also our framework, and if you notice the National Financial Inclusion Strategy's 4 pillars, these are reflected in the same pillars that the BSP follows. So we have policies and regulations in place, we have financial education and consumer protection programs and policies, we have data and measurement initiatives, and we have advocacy programs. I will not go into detail, but you can probably ask questions later during the break. Now this is also a snapshot of all the regulations that we have issued since we were involved in financial inclusion. So this is a 4-quadrant slide. This quadrant covers all regulations that we issued to ensure that our banks are able to widen the range of products and services that they can offer. So we have microfinance, they are allowed to do microfinance loans, microfinance plus micro deposits. They are even allowed to deliver microinsurance products, housing microfinance. And our credit risk management framework also allows the banks not to get collateral, and for 3 million loans and below, it's not necessary that they get tax returns or documentation. We have, for this quadrant, it's expanded physical network. So we have micro banking offices. These are just small banking offices that cater to the financially excluded. It can be a one desk in a palenque or in a wet market, catering to the needs of the clients in that area. We now allow cash agents, so banks can partner with any institution, provided they are well selected, so that these can be used to deliver the cash to their clients. We also have virtual currency exchange regulations and money service business regulations that, again, widen the range of available access points for our financially excluded markets to access financial services. Because of the physical limitations of having brick and mortar branches and also economic limitations, we recognize the importance of virtual reach. So we have e-money issuance regulations that encourage our banks to go into digital financial services. E-money network service providers, meaning encouraging partnerships between bank and non-banks, even fintechs, to partner with our banks to deliver financial services in the rural areas. We have liberalized our customer onboarding rules and regulations, so we have allowed, again, outsourcing of KYC. We have risk-based KYC, so if a client is profiled as low risk, then some documents can be dispensed with, only one ID. Our regulations only require banks to get one ID to validate the identity of clients. We have established market conduct rules and regulations. We have a very comprehensive financial consumer protection framework that promotes transparency. We have a consumer assistance mechanism that assists clients that have complaints against our supervised institutions. These are also more, in terms of climate finance, we think that our regulations already enable our banks to do project financing, to create and innovate products and services that will address climate finance needs. However, we did a study way back in 2015 and asked the banks whether they are ready to do so and whether they are ready for specific guidelines to do so. However, the main sentiment in that study is that they need capacity building. They would want to go into sustainable finance. They would want to adopt sustainable finance principles, but they would need capacity building because they are not yet familiar with the tools, the methodologies, the experts in the field that can help them assess the risks and be able to manage these risks appropriately. There is also a need for higher awareness of the importance of getting involved in climate finance initiatives. Now, these are just the ongoing...
Yes, may I just interrupt?
Yes.
You've been using the term climate finance initiatives, and that's good. Do we actually, what is the BSP program with the private banks and both Land Bank and the three government banks, Amana Bank, Land Bank, and DBP for climate finance? Is there a part of their portfolio allocated, sorry to interrupt, for climate finance or for green energy or for sustainable investing, whichever?
Ma'am, our regulations do not really prevent them from doing climate financing. So they have if they are able to assess the risk and they are able to provide that financing, depending on their risk appetite, they are allowed to do so. And that is for all of the banks, not just our government banks. And also the reason why we're saying capacity building is important, because even in the BSP, while we would want to contribute, we do not yet know how we can help in the area, and so we have an ongoing project with the International Finance Corporation to help capacitate ourselves, fully understand what it is, so that we can be able to play a bigger role in this area.
So it's safe to say, while we always speak about it here, it's non-existent.
From our end, ma'am, yes.
Just because, you know, all these blurbs, all these PowerPoints, high talk, but actually, climate finance and green financing does not exist both in government banks and in private banks. If we would say that there is a need for real estate collateral for all these projects, if DBP and Land Bank, maybe they do climate finance. Is there a part of their portfolio dedicated for climate finance, and do we call it as such? I just want to be educated on this. And is there a BSP guideline for our government banks at least?
There is no specific BSP guideline yet, ma'am, at this point. But we want to be part of the conversation, so we are here and be present. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And is there any green banking window in private banks? A part of the portfolio dedicated for sustainable projects, for green financing, climate finance? No.
I know specific projects, yes po. So it depends. Like BPI is like taking the lead to have a sustainability unit. They have...
I don't always, because palaging real estate, the profit motive is there, which is commercial bank ka. Kailangan mag-profit ka, hindi ka pwedeng lugi. But I haven't seen really a bank that would show their very keen support for sustainable investing, climate finance, or green, a green window, a green banking window. I have to see that yet. Yun lang, because I heard climate finance, all these, it's very interesting. But when we go out, I hear startups, they want to, but it's hard to Agri-Agra law lang nga, hindi pa ma-implement ng bangko. I'm the author of the Agri-Agra law. The banks probably hate me for doing that. But what we meant in the Agri-Agra law is to lend to the agricultural workers and the beneficiaries of agrarian reform. The banks would rather pay the multa, correct?
Yes, ma'am. That's
Is
also
there any bank compliant with the Agri-Agra? Wala.
the rural banks mostly are compliant.
Yan ang kailangan eh. Ang Agri-Agra ba ang nagpapatupad ng DBP at saka Land Bank? Is Land Bank complying with Agri-Agra?
Yes, ma'am. All of the banks need to comply with it. But as you said,
Can you check for me?
Yes,
Baka
ma'am.
mismong government bank nag-violate ng Agri-Agra.
Yes, ma'am. We can provide with the data on
Sige. And
the
I
aggregate
just
data.
wanted, so, in short, climate finance is just a concept now. It does not exist yet.
Not yet, ma'am. But we would want to be more capacitated to be able to contribute.
Perhaps the GCF can help us in other countries. I know in Bali, Mr. Park, you were there. Ang galing, Mongolia had a very good presentation. I said Bangladesh. I approached the Mongolia lady. Mongolia, they're advanced in climate finance. Was it also Bangladesh or Vietnam? Bangladesh, Indonesia. Naiwanan na tayo. Palagi, di ba? Yes, Mongolia na lang eh. Maliit sa atin ang Mongolia eh. Could you help us? Remember, I talked to you about it, right? You were supposed to draft something for me. Yes, I remember, Mr. Park, because I saw the presentation of Mongolia, and you were supposed to help me. Yeah, that's why I brought you here. Very good. You're supposed to draft something for me on a green banking measure, or to compel, not compel, maybe to encourage banks for more green finance, correct? You're supposed to help us with that.
Presenting that in
You're presenting this after. I'm speeding up your presentation. Okay, proceed, Central Bank.
Thank you. Ma'am, if may I read the quote from the study that we did with IFC about how banks see regulatory directives on green finance. So regulatory directives may compel banks to adopt green finance and sustainable finance principles, but the costs of compliance may result in avoidance, particularly if the business case is not fully understood, and so the importance of increased awareness and increased capacity building. So I'm down to my last 3 slides. These are just the ongoing work of the BSP. We would like to focus more on digital delivery because we understand the physical and economic barriers that our banks face when they provide financial services to our excluded markets. So this is a national retail payment system that we are working on. It's a policy and regulatory framework that aims to enable each individual, each of us, to transfer money or value from any account to any account using any bank through any device. But that is the ultimate vision. We are now just working with the industry to make it happen. So all of the rules and regulations are being discussed with the industry for institutionalization. I mentioned FinTech earlier. Of course, FinTech can help a lot because this is financial technology for financial services. And so we would want to utilize the good side of FinTechs to reach the unbanked and the underbanked. So moving forward, we will continue our work in financial inclusion, but more focused now on digital services. Of course, cash will always still be there, but we would also want to go down market and establish basic bank accounts that will not require any KYC, but it's going to be limited, with limited threshold in transactions, as an access point, like a first step for our excluded markets, those that cannot provide IDs, to have an account, and later on possibly move them up to other more value-adding financial services. This is just a list of all the working groups, international working groups that we are involved in the BSP, and the different recognitions that we have received, because the Economic Intelligence Unit has ranked the Philippines as 3rd in the world to have the most conducive environment for financial inclusion, and the Brookings Institute also considered us the most improved country in terms of digital financial services. So we're also a member of the Alliance for Financial Inclusion, the G20 Global Partnership for Financial Inclusion, the Basel Consultative Group, on working on financial inclusion and also the ASEAN Working Committee on Financial Inclusion. Like Commissioner De Guzman mentioned, we're here. We would want to converge because we believe financial inclusion and climate finance is a role for everybody.
Thank you very much, Deputy Director Tomas of the Central Bank. We reserve your questions for the open forum later. Now we proceed with the next presentation, which is one of the outputs of our Green Climate Fund Readiness Program, a presentation on climate smart roadmap for climate financing. And the presenter is Mr. Ray Guarin, Program Lead and Climate Finance Consultant, Philippine GCF Readiness Program, United Nations Environment.
Okay. Again, thank you for inviting us. Essentially, I will be sharing with you some of the insights that we've learned by developing the Climate Smart Readiness Program for Philippines. The program is funded by the German government, and it's been done in collaboration with the UNEP, UNDP, and WRI, and together also with the Climate Change Commission. So one of the major achievements of this program is the development of a Climate Smart Roadmap, which can share insights on how to green or develop what you call the climate financing for the banking industry in Philippines. And the other component there is that we are now developing what you call a Climate Smart Readiness Program for Philippines, which we intend to submit as one of the Climate Smart finance projects, based as a result of this Climate Smart project. Another output of this roadmap was the development of this Climate Smart Network. This is essentially the transfer mechanism when the project ends in September 2017. So as you can see, we have touched base with all the stakeholders. We have met and entered into some MOUs with them, specifically with the Alamana Investment Bank, because we indeed believe that Islamic finance has a lot to offer in developing climate finance. We also touched base with DBP. We also touched base with ST, DUST, PESA to develop economic zones, green economic zones, and TESDA as well. So, what does green finance mean? I would just like to go straight to the concept of mitigation and adaptation, because in the field of climate finance, there are specific meanings as to what climate mitigation activities are. So when we speak of climate mitigation, it simply means that it is about reduction, avoidance, or capture of greenhouse gas emissions, but you must be able to account for it. Okay? And some of the eligible activities are renewable energy, clean energy, energy efficiency, reforestation, climate smart agriculture. There are ineligible activities such as like investments in coal, gas, oil projects, even if they're involved in infrastructures, because even if like energy efficient infrastructures, because that's not just part of it. So when you do in Philippines, when you do renewable energy, clean energy, energy efficiency, that's already climate finance. That's mitigation financing. So you just need to articulate these components in your projects. In terms of adaptation, this is very critical to understand. In adaptation finance, it means managing impacts of extreme climate events, whether they're fast or slow onsets, and building resilience of people, ecosystems, and built infrastructure. In adaptation financing, you must have three elements. These must be present. The context of vulnerability and not just risks. You have to have a statement of intent, how you intend to address that vulnerability context of that particular entity, and link the project activities to these to address the vulnerabilities. Now, without that, you just have what you call a business as usual developmental project. So if you have a project that does not include that, don't call it adaptation finance. I think this should be the baseline that we need to set. Okay, the Paris Accord is all about pursuing low carbon climate resilient work. And the NDC's national determined contributions are cascaded according to adaptation and mitigation commitments. So as you can see, mitigation is all about building resilience and adaptive capacities of communities. While the mitigation component speaks of reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, given a baseline of 2000 to 2030, targeting the different sectors. Now, going back to the green jobs, how they're related. So when you speak of green jobs, Okay, they also have what you call adaptation-friendly jobs now, because they speak of jobs that promote good business and environment, jobs that protect people, jobs that avoid maximize use of resources. Same thing for the mitigation. It speaks of decarbonizing the economy. So how can we effectively develop green jobs and skills in support of climate smart development? So if you look at that, green jobs begin with the business value chain. So you have to develop the greening of these business value chains from the inputs, whether it's energy, infrastructure, transport, or even water sector, and train these people to develop and contribute to development of adaptation and mitigation projects so they can contribute to the sectors that would deliver the NDCs. No? But there are interventions that are needed to be done. Like, for example, we're working with Tesla to develop these components, no? As I'll show later on. Then the other ones, how can the NFIs address that? Well, if you want to do low carbon climate resilient development, then you have to do mitigation adaptation projects. And the role of the banks is to provide these types of financing instruments. The question is, are they ready to develop these types of, or deliver these types of financing instruments? Will they serve the vulnerable communities? Will they deliver it to make it accessible and affordable to the stakeholders themselves? So it's just a question of how to do with that, no? And this is where the climate smart roadmaps comes in. The roadmap essentially speaks of three strategic interventions: one at the policy level, one at the operational level, and the other one at the project portfolio development. In terms of developing the project portfolio, we're looking to develop what you call climate finance advisory services, no? Like developing models that would support local PPP investments or risk transfer mechanism for climate change friendly projects. Important here would be the knowledge products, no? Like investment maps per region or LGU clusters, no? Investment maps in the form of like carbon sinks areas, renewable energy, ecotourism, no? And new financial products for PFIs and insurance companies, like the ones we're doing right now with Tesla, the ASEAN Climate Smart Skills Technology Business Value Chain Fund. So this is just an example of what the fund would do, no? It essentially would fund these types of activities, developing skills, technology, and it will also develop the business value chain of the MSMEs, and at the same time the sub-projects that they will be pursuing, no? So without that, you cannot pursue green jobs, no? And that's where the banks need to focus on as well. In terms of capacity building, we need to develop what you call technical training for personnel on greenhouse gas accounting, or essentially climate finance tracking, no? Because if you're looking to tap into international climate finance, they are using a similar system. So you cannot be, we should be on the same page with them, no? So we must have the same method of accounting climate finance for both mitigation and adaptation. So there is that need to develop standardized, harmonized protocols on climate risk screening or climate risk management framework. Yes, please.
Thank you. No, you continue. I just, all of these that we're talking about are all important, interesting, well-researched, well-phrased, everything. But if our banks do not implement it, if there is no green window for our banks, if our banks are all for profit, which is why they exist, and I don't take it against them, if they are wary of renewable energy financing and would rather finance comfortably coal projects, all of the things we're discussing in this room is useless. So that's my challenge to all of us here. And it's not just BPI. I take note again of Fred Constantino's interventions that of the need for RAM, because for project finance, I'm glad that BPI corrected it. It's not project finance, no? Yeah. So all of this GHG accounting, all of that, this is all good. But really, if we don't see more banks being progressive and being supportive of sustainable investing, green finance, climate finance, but maybe this talk here would be useful. That's why I hope that there would be more banks present here today. Right now, baka allergic pa sila, hindi pa sila bihasa sa magpapahiram sa sustainable investing projects or sa green finance. Kailangan pa lahat may real estate collateral. Yeah. That's just my intervention. I just feel frustrated sometimes, I admit, when I see the situation in reality and on the ground, that what I advocate and do as policy is not implemented in real life. That's frustrating, yes. But then, I don't own the bank, and the banks exist for profit. So, we should be able to operationalize the need to support renewable energy, which is the way forward for the implementation of the Paris Agreement, and other sustainable investments, so that everything we're talking about would actually redound to the benefit of the people. Now, how do we do that? Yun ang challenge. Kasi all these PowerPoints are so good. Paano natin how do we lend to the micro and small enterprises? How do the people in Maguindanao, how many barangays that are still flooded now as we speak, it's been flooded since before SONA, how do we make it a resilient community and actually desilt the river and dredge the canals and relocate the people? How do we give them small financing needed? How do we finance, for example, Marawi City to make it a more resilient community? Set aside the terrorism aspect and the peace and order, so that when we rebuild it, it would be a sustainable city. Yon. So, I hope that everything we're talking about can translate to clearer action for banks, private, and government to adopt. Yeah. Please continue. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Actually, most of the policies in place are, I think, already good for the banks, especially the fiduciary management standards. But in terms of the climate finance, I think we just need to articulate, for example, in both mitigation and adaptation, some of the additional guidelines that would enable these banks to become eligible to participate in what you call climate finance. For example, Banco Central mentioned that they're already into financial inclusion. Financial inclusion, especially when you deal with the vulnerable people in the agri sector, fisher folks, and other communities, is actually a climate adaptation finance activity. If we define the context of vulnerability of that particular community or resources that the banks are financing. And this is where the capacity building that needs to step in right now. As in, it should have happened a long time ago, but between now and 2020, wherein the GCF will be opening their windows for the $100 billion fund, now is the time to build that capacity. And what do we mean by capacity? These are, we have identified under the Climate Smart Roadmap some of the key interventions that needed to be in place between now and the first half of 2018. One, for example, climate impact studies. Without the climate impact studies per landscape, per region, we cannot decide what the context of vulnerability of each and every one of these communities, ecosystems, or resources or built infrastructure that these investors have. No? So that cannot be, we cannot move forward, we cannot plan, we cannot do policies how to move forward. We should also simplify the standards on what to do climate risk management framework. In all these discussions that we've had when we were doing stakeholder consultations, a lot of people have different approaches, but essentially we need to simplify. It's just a question of asking if, is the project going to be impacted by climate change, or will the project be able to address the impacts of climate change on the sector itself? Not all projects need to be climate adaptation friendly, no, but some are, okay? So, climate finance investment prioritization guidelines. If banks need to tap climate financing in general, then they have to align with the general, what you call, climate finance prioritization guidelines, which pertains to transformationality, country ownership, private sector ownership, addressing sustainable development issues on environmental systems, gender, social inclusion, mitigation, adaptation, financial sustainable issues like issues of affordability, accessibility, and availability of funds. Third would be the development of green investment maps in the developer's handbook, because without that, you cannot identify where the opportunities are. And most of the time, these investment maps are held in by people themselves, and they don't want to share unless they pay for a fee, which could be a business practice, no, which I don't have anything against it. But if you put it out in the open, then maybe that would trigger the inflow of investments faster, no, because when you have an investment map, like a renewable investment map for Philippines on wind and solar or biomass, then the lead time to identify where these sites are would be cut from 6 months maybe down to 1 week. Then you have a national climate portal. It should be a point of convergence and harmonization of whatever climate data and services. Because without that, you will have just what you call scientific data not being understood by the end users themselves, whether these are decision makers at the developers level or the farmer fisher folks at the community level. So green jobs and green skills, no? You need to develop that, no? Because moving forward, when you green the business value chains, you need resources, human resources that could help develop these forward, no? That's why there is that intent among SPESA to develop green ecozones alongside with green human skill resources. The capacity building components we are thinking of here would be introduction of the special fiduciary standards, no, like environment, social, climate, and gender. Simplification of all this risk management assessment framework. Technical training for these people on how to go about it. Now, the banks, private banks, it may not be their core business. That's why it is not their intent to hire full-time these people, but it could be a consultative entity that would provide advisory services as the need comes. Maybe this could help spur private banks' participation into these types of developmental activities. So these are the developmental needs that I've identified that could be done between now and 2018. Now, the next step after that would be the identification of developed local PPP climate smart project portfolio. These are just some of the projects that we identified under the climate smart roadmap, and that would pertain, for example, the Liguasan Marsh climate smart halal economic zone. This would entail different LGUs on the ground. It would entail the participation of Alamana Islamic Investment Bank, because we're thinking of both Sukul and Takaful Insurance.
Can I just intervene here, please? These are, you said about climate smart roadmap.
Yes. Yes.
Please explain. These 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 projects are existing projects that are funded by which climate finance sources? It's quite vague. Let's say Liguasan Marsh, halal economic zone. Does that already exist? Which are the LGUs? What is the PEZA zone located in Liguasan Marsh? I'm not familiar. And what are the climate finance sources?
Okay. First of all, these are the concepts identified bottom-up now when we were doing the stakeholder consultations. There are ongoing plans, and they wanted additional support because climate financing is just like co-financing, additional co-financing. No? These are, yes, in relation to that, these are projects about to happen. These are early-stage concepts.
Can you please, Liguasan Marsh, that's so important, but that's also where there are issues of NPA and BIFF, MLF, but I'd be so happy to help. I'd like to know the Liguasan Marsh Climate Smart Halal Economic Zone. Is this merely a proposal? Is it already a PEZA declared zone?
Well, in that particular instance, the Liguasan Marsh Complex is an ongoing concept idea being proposed, for example, by the city of South Cotabato and all the other provinces or municipalities within that town. It is a complex. One component of that would be the development of agriculture, a contiguous agricultural zone around the Liguasan Marsh itself, the dredging of the rivers that would prevent flooding every time there is intense precipitation within the area.
South Cotabato. I'm not sure. It's South Cotabato.
Cotabato City, sorry.
Cotabato City. Yes, not South Cot. That's
No,
Region
no,
12.
Cotabato
Yes,
City.
yes. Okay. So the Cotabato City government has presented a proposal for the creation of this PEZA in the Liguasan Marsh. Is that correct? And it will be funded by AIIB? Is that the Asian Infrastructure Bank?
No. That is Al Amana Islamic Investment Bank.
The Amana Bank. So I just wanted to verify that. First, there's a need in Mindanao. Number two, we talk buzzwords, big terms. I want to know if it's really operationalized on the ground. I'd like to know from PEZA if there is such a pending application for an economic zone from DG Kitching Plaza. Has it been nakahain na ba? Is it already a proposal? Second, Is there how much funding from the Amana Islamic Bank is given to this? Has the economic zone been approved? Is there an approval process? What kind of light industries will be in the economic zone? And when you say climate finance sources for the Liguasan Marsh, what are these other climate finance sources? May I know, please?
Okay. First of all, these are early stage discussions, no? And I think Chairman Bancola could elaborate on that. No? Now, with regard to the PESA, these are the proposals being proposed to the PESA to develop an halal economic zone. So it's a combination of different components to develop that area into an ecozone. No? And the entities supposed there those are the stakeholders involved in developing that particular area. And we are still in the early stage of discussions at this point.
May I know the focal person or the institution that your agency, the UN, is dealing with in this Liguasan Marsh project?
Okay. In Liguasan Marsh, we are speaking with the Cotabato City.
Who's the mayor now?
Cynthia Gianni. Mayor Cynthia Gianni. Cynthia Gianni, madam.
It's Mayor Giali who would know this in your office.
Yes, I'm speaking with the administrator of Cotabato City, which is Dr. Juan Danday.
Yes. Could you kindly furnish our office with each of the proposals and where they're at for this, for just Liguasan Marsh first, okay? So, wala pa po ito. It's not an existing economic zone. It's not even with PESA yet. It's just talks.
There are no, they have what you call pre-feasibility studies being prepared right now.
You're helping them?
Yes, in fact, in collaboration with the AIIB.
Okay. Number 2, carbon sequestration and quantification project with the DNR EMB. Is that an existing project with DNR, and is there a funding mechanism, and what is PPP?
Public-private partnership.
There's a public-private partnership between the EMB and DNR?
Yes, there is a
private sector involved in carbon sequestration.
Dr. Apple Sajid is one of the private sector components now, but in relation to the carbon sequestration, that is an ongoing project wherein they've already identified the area that could be where the carbon sequestration zones could be developed. In fact, the idea there is the creation of a green economic zone, and we just had a discussion last week with the DDG Tio Panga on how to develop green economic zones in this area. This is in Bukidnon area, actually. And so,
creation of a green economic zone and a carbon sequestration project with the DNR EMB are two different things.
Yes, it's true. But what we're saying is like it's a la Silicon Valley type, wherein you have locators developing R&D for clean energy, developing
in Bukidnon?
In Bukidnon, in that particular area, ma'am.
Is it already an economic zone that declared?
It is not yet an economic zone. No. It is just an identified zone by which...
I know which town in Bukidnon, and I will check with Senator
correct.
Mig Subiri. Valencia, you mean?
Valencia.
Valencia. Yes. Could you kindly give us more details? And I'll check also about this. 3, a 50-megawatt smart grid geothermal project in South Cotabato. What is this?
This is a project in South Cotabato City
being
on Mount
funded by,
Parker.
Yes. Who is funding the 50 megawatt?
The funding is being sourced right now. The project is at the stage of pre-FS development. We have submitted the proposal to DOST to do what you call the R&D or pre-feasibility study.
Yes. May I know who is the developer of the geothermal project?
The geothermal project is going to be a PPP. It's going to be a collaboration between the South Cotabato province, the municipality of Tibuli, and we're looking at, in that concept, because the resources have been assessed, that has been done previous years, and what we're looking for is to develop that zone as an economic zone, wherein the locators would be power plant operators delivering what you call distributed power, no, microgrids.
You're talking here to the mayor of Tiboli town and Governor Fuentes of South Cotabato.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Could you also give us just a concept or whatever, because these are interesting projects, but I've never heard of it, probably because it's still a concept and not yet on the ground. But I want to see how we could help.
Yes, ma'am.
No? Okay. Number 4, coal gasification systems with carbon capture and storage. Mindanao, that's so broad. Can you kindly simplify For me, what does it
Okay.
actually mean?
Actually, there is an identified coal site, no, but the idea of extracting the coal is not that, no, but it is more like liquefying the coal in site and generating steam out of it to generate power. So that is the concept, no.
Consider the green project.
It is not actually a green project
So
in
why
that
would
sense.
we
No.
even fund it?
This project is being viewed as an adaptation project, no, because the main objective there is to build economic activities within that area.
Which part of Mindanao are you looking for coal gasification?
Let me check that. What area? Caraga.
So this is a coal mine.
It is a...
It's a coal field. Yes, so you'll be mining for coal.
It's liquefying.
Has an environment impact assessment been made by the DNR? It's just... So why focus on coal if you have so much RE?
Well, the intention really was, because if you notice, there is a carbon capture storage component to that. So that would also form part of the exercise to demonstrate
So
whether
that
we
you
can develop
prove how
CCS.
you can capture
Exactly.
carbon and it does not emit.
Yes, and if we can apply that across the region and promote economic development without extracting, because that is located in a forested area as well. So there is that balance that will be...
Again, what province is this? What town?
Caraga.
We're in Caraga. It's a whole region. No. Kindly give us the,
Yes,
the
ma'am.
details also here. Okay. Then the climate start, green ecozones. So that's very broad.
Yes, this is actually a discussion that we had, no, an early stage discussion we had just last week with PESA, no, because the intention was to help the PESA mainstream climate in their operations, no, and one of the ideas was to develop green economic zones or climate smart economic zones, wherein the locators will be using clean power and you will be employing energy
Now you're
efficient.
talking. Of everything we discussed here, number 5 is what is doable. Because first, we already have the economic zones existing. Number 2, we already have all the laws existing. All they need to do is to follow it. Do they actually implement the 1989 Rainwater Collector Act, Rainwater Harvesting Act, by gathering rainwater? Do they actually implement RA 9003 or the Ecological Solid Waste Management Law? Do they actually implement the RE law of 2008 and the source of their power is renewable energy? And then many more other environmental laws. So perhaps of the 5, making all our economic zones green, whether they are PESA zones or PESA accredited, could be the easiest thing to do, because we should convert all PESA zones into climate smart green eco zones by actually doing nothing except following existing laws. There you'll help me. And there we don't need funding. We just need people to follow the rules. Right? All the others are interesting, and I would be happy to be educated on these 4 projects, maybe not the coal, maybe the top 3, and then see how I can help in funding it from GAA, or even utilize other sources of funds. The AIIB was ratified recently. Is anyone accessing funds from the Asian Infrastructure Bank of China with only less than, I think, 1% interest per annum?
Actually, what we have done so far is to develop this concept note on the Climate Smart Economic Program, which incorporates some of these concept notes, because the idea is to get grant financing to develop the pre-FS or the more advanced ones to develop the full-blown feasibility studies and match them with potential investors. That's why PESA is involved, especially during the stage of roadshow presentations, which is the intention from the period 2019 all the way to 2021.
Just a comment and a warning to all of us. FSFFSS. Capacity building, capacity building, capacity building. Meeting, meeting, meeting. Summit, summit, summit. Workshop, workshop, workshop. Overload of all these things while the climate is in crisis. Let's really simplify, operationalize, and take action now. We keep on It's good to do FS. Of course, everybody should do FS. But many of these researches, scientific studies, FS, actually just probably are archived in USBs or some files there from all administrations. And not everything is actually implemented well. Yun lang, it's a warning. Even us, dami. After this, we'll go to a next meeting. Yan ang kasalanan nating lahat. Ang dami-daming pag-aaral research and then it's not shared or not implemented, sayang.
Actually, the development of the FS is part of what you call the project portfolio development, because we need to submit something to the GCF and something at the same level of preparedness or
we can't do
quality,
anything without an FS, a feasibility study. But let's make sure these feasibility studies are actually shared and used. Yun lang. Kasi ang daming nangyayari. Even these plans, let's say, of DA, I see all their plans, no? And if there's no GAA funding, wala na. I hope, Alice, you have an opportunity to present. You presented in the cluster a few weeks ago. Yun, may pag-aaral na. Kulang na lang yung funding, right? So, is that part of the GCF, the Climate Smart Cities? The DA has done extensive research. So maybe that could be part of it. Kasi nahihinayang ako. I just feel it's a waste when so much studies and research are conducted and then these people in the bureaucracy stop there because they don't have access to funding, whether domestic or foreign.
If there is one study that needs to be done, as in now, that will help all proponents for a climate finance project, that is the development of climate impact studies. Without that, we cannot move forward, because if a proponent would use a separate study and another one uses, then we don't have coherence or uniformity on the climate projections and so forth. That needs to be done. That needs to happen now. It could be that the PSF could provide the funding to develop that and do the studies for Mindanao, for Visayas, for the whole Philippines. And whatever the output of those studies could be shared as part of the climate risk and vulnerability assessment to be included as part of the proposal, because these are key components that will be looked for by the GCF or even other climate finance sources like ADB, GTZ.
I'm glad you mentioned about the PSF. Who is a focal person in the DOF for the People's Survival Fund?
Madam Chair, we're also involved in the Treasury in terms of moving the fund forward. Yeah.
It's been there for so long, and there were 1 or 2 local governments that actually had won, should be awarded by now. Can you kindly see what happened? And I want to see it spent. That's 2 billion. Who is the focal person, Manny, in CCCOM for the PSF?
In the last PSF...
In CCCOM. Commonwealth. Yes, can you work together, please?
Yes,
and make sure that those already vetted and awarded by the board should receive it. Para hindi nung sabihin na, puro naman batas ni Lagarda, wala naman napupunta sa taong bayan. Kung na-vet ng board, ha, ngayon, linipat na sa inyo, paandarin nyo. Hindi gumalaw sa CCCOM, mabagal. Baka kasing bagal kayo, mas mabagal pa kayo. Because I'm not sure also if the funds will revert to Treasury by December or if it's a revolving fund. Has that been ascertained by COA? What is it? I don't understand your handwriting. Yes. The 2B or just the winning LGUs? No, the 1 billion has been obligated to whom? To DBP, but not yet. Okay, ganito na. Clear to. There's 2 billion in PSF. The 1 billion, the first 1 billion, was it reverted to Treasury or is it still there?
It's still with us, Madam Chair.
Wait. Isang question, dalawang answer ha, government agency. Sabi niya, revert to Treasury. Sabi niya, it's still with you. Hindi init ulo ko ha. Ano yung totoo? Ano yung totoo? Sabi niyo, it's still with you. Sabi niyo, reverted to Treasury. CCCOM and DOF, get your act together. Yes, Commonwealth. Use the microphone, please.
Is 1 billion, there will be an additional 1 billion to be provided by DBM for next year. So in
How do you
effect,
know what I will provide?
2 billion.
No. You do not assume I will give you another 1 billion. Excuse me. DBM committed to that in their NEP. Can I check?
That was included in their proposal,
their
actually.
proposal?
Yes, yes.
No,
to have
because of your
another
bad record
1
of not spending the funds, I want to zero budget you and give it to Marawi. In fact, if there is a 2 billion NEP for the PSF, I would rather give that to excise it and give it to Marawi Rehabilitation or DOE.
Madam Chair, after your...
Okay, ito muna, clear. So, the first 1 billion of 2015, where is it now? Revert to Treasury as Noel said, or is it with DOF?
That's the
First 1 billion, huh?
that's the fund that we are looking to obligate via DBP, because as you've discussed with Secretary Dominguez, we have already transferred the PSF Secretariat from the CCC to the DOF.
Nakakalipat lang, so I'm not blaming you. And so the first 1 billion, Garland says it reverted to Treasury. Mr. Santa Ana, if you're not sure that it's still with you, baka you're confused with the second 1 billion, just find out. Noel, you're saying it went to Treasury already? That's what you know. So reverted na, hindi nagamit kasi eh. Yes. Hindi na-release. It was never released. Okay, just find out please. Yes. Okay. So Garland is correct. Until December lang. Correct. Very good. DBM is here. DBM should always be in all my hearings. Very good. Okay. So, see, don't answer when you're not sure. It was reverted to Treasury. That's an example of not just underspending, no spending. It's really a waste. There's so much need in the countryside, in the grassroots, and we don't spend it. I don't blame the CCCOM. It's a new agency I created by law, and they're still building capacity, how to work, how to do all of this work. So that you only have 1 billion, which will revert to Treasury by December if not spent, and the Secretariat has been transferred to you. But there were local governments that already were vetted and awarded. But that's already obligated to DBP, meaning you excise the winning LGUs, and then whatever is the balance of the 1 billion of 2016 will be spent by DBP. Is that correct?
We will obligate it via DBP because we are looking to...
Sila magbibigay ng pondo sa LGU.
The fund download would be through the DBP as the conduit.
So, DBP, hindi mag-expire by December. Hindi mag-revert sa Treasury kasi na-obligate na ninyo. Ganun ba yun?
That's the plan, Madam Chair.
So, ito lang ang tanong ko sa DBP since kayo ang secretariat dyan. Hinahalo ba nyo sa pondo ng DBP or nakahiwalay dapat yon? Hiwalay dapat yon, hindi dapat hinahalo sa pondo nila. So, nakikita natin saan napupunta.
It should be separate.
It should be separate, yeah. And could you please give the Committee on Finance a, quarterly report? But the report to date of the 1 billion, whatever is remaining, if it's 1 billion na lang. And then, therefore, if you've zero budget for PSF next year, meron pa rin naman 1 billion na obligate sa DBP. Hindi kayo zero, right?
Yes.
Even if you're zero budget, because how much was the LGU, Noel, that in Surigao? How much was the funds, the 2 LGUs? Magkano
for 2 projects approved, it's about 120 million.
100 lang. You still have 880 million. So you don't need the funds for next year, right? You don't need, unless you show me if you spend everything, okay, if you spend everything, by the time I hear my budget, you will get your 1 billion next year. But if you not spent it, and you don't have any LGU or any PO receiving it, then you'll have zero budget next year. Anyway, it's downloaded to DBP and you spend it. Prove to me you can spend the money. It can go to other people who need it more. Yun. Okay, thank you. I hope LBRM always listening to my staff. It's just to teach a lesson to all government agencies. You ask for the money, you should have a plan how to spend it, and you should spend it at the proper time, because the budget is a 12-month cycle, and with the Budget Reform Act, this will be institutionalized, so agencies would know how to plan, how to spend, and your money will be returned if not spent. But that is an injustice to the people, because that means they were not served. Okay? Sige. Thank you. Proceed. Who was Whose time did I get, Mr.?
No, I'm done, actually. I just presented the next step, so I'm good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Green. We proceed to the next presentation, which is by BPI on green banking initiatives in the Philippines. Joanne Ayala, VP of Sustainable Energy Finance and Specialized Lending Team of the BPI.
Okay, good morning and thank you very much for inviting us. I'd like to believe that we were invited even if we were a private bank because of certain innovations, certain initiatives that we were able to marry despite being a private bank. You see, a private bank doesn't have low-cost funding. A private bank doesn't have subsidies. It doesn't have all those big grants that can be used to finance green projects. So please understand that you are talking to or you're listening to a private bank which has a profitability target, a listed bank at that, and have shareholders to protect, shareholders and interests to protect. But just the same, that's why I understand we get invited to these types of forums, even abroad at that, is because people would like to see, I was just in Sri Lanka a couple of months ago, and CEOs of banks, they were asking, how can a private bank like you actually do business and make money out of an innovation like this? And we would say at the end of the day, it is seen just like any other loan of a bank, where profit is ensured and secured through our technical assistance. But at the end of the day, we tell the project proponents, you have to succeed. Your project has to be technically viable. You have to be profitable because we don't want to foreclose. Remember, you are not in a charitable engagement. This is a business. And that is the exact model that I will show you today. How does BPI do it as a private bank? And we would just be happy to share it with all other private banks because we all have to help together because as we see now, there are still limitations on the public sector, so the private sector has to move. So how do we make do with what we have? Okay, I'll skip a couple of slides here. These are just some of those that we mentioned when we talk to the SMEs who are our target market. And the main issue here is that the Philippines, of course, has the most expensive electricity most of the time. Well, sometimes we compete head-to-head with Japan, but most of the times we win as #1. So this is one of the initiatives of BPI, originally selfish. In fact, we did a 16-city vulnerability study because we wanted to know where the bank should be lending or the bank should discourage our clients from investing in. And we realized that after the first 4 cities results came out, we realized that we could not keep the results to ourselves. And this was in 2009. And then we said, come on, let's spend a little bit more, bring it out to the SMEs, even to the LGUs and the water districts, etc., and share the study. Now the study is freely accessible through this link. We've done the 16-city roadshow twice, and just last week Cebu is again asking us to discuss what their vulnerability is. So we continue to do that, and fortunately I belong to a bank who's willing to spend for education. Another thing that we tell the SMEs is that there's globalization that is happening, so you cannot be left behind. Of course, we know that renewable energy is a small portion only of our energy mix. The Philippines, nevertheless, is still among the best performing and fastest growing economy in Asia. Now, one thing that Haiyan did well for us and which BPI is taking advantage of is after 2013, the attendees to our educational events has increased tremendously, and people, even mayors, are coming just to listen. So this, to the foreigners here, this is my bank where we're born. Today is in fact our 166th anniversary, where we're born August 1, 1851. So I left my bank there celebrating our 166th anniversary today. We were the first bank to do sustainable energy finance in 2008, thanks to the help of IFC, whom we partnered with that time. USA, by the way, and their representatives here, thank you also for choosing BPI to partner with. We were the first bank to fully utilize, you see, the guarantees that they provided SMEs. And that's one thing good naman po, when it comes to private bank, we move a little bit faster. And because the projects are doing very well, the funds allotted to us were fully utilized. It was 30 million US. And in fact, we are telling USA, maybe you have more because there's still so much more being requested from us on the countryside. These are SMEs outside Manila, outside Cebu, and outside Davao. And there was just so much take-up. In just a couple of months after I took over in 2014, the funds were fully utilized right away. So please do let us know, because we know there are so many other banks who are not using their allocation. We would gladly take them on and distribute them where they should be utilized immediately. Okay, so this is BPI's partnership with the International Finance Corporation. We were fortunate because of that partnership to won in a challenge, and we were given funding to help educate the SMEs even more, and also to give them technical assistance. But the technical assistance that we give now is free, funded by the bank. How can we do that? Because at the end of the day, as I was emphasizing earlier, this is a business proposition. It is not charity. We are a private bank, so everything we do is, yes, profit-oriented, but profit with a purpose. So what do? We give free energy walkthrough audits. We also have a partnership with EU-funded HEMS, high-efficiency motors, and so we are going to each and every company, especially those which have very old machines and very inefficient at that. You see, we believe that before you go to renewable energy, especially those who are so attracted to having solar right away in the rooftop, we tell them, come on, you look first at your operations and see how inefficient you are. You may still be using incandescent lights, which should be used for chickens, not man. These are emitting more heat than light. So we tell them, you have 40-year-old machines in your sugar mills. They were imported 40 years old, so by now they are 80 years old. So these things we campaign on, and we help educate different companies on. Now we have, other than the free technical evaluation of feasibility studies, we have a risk-sharing facility. Thanks to the help of IFC, we give free technical training sessions. We have vendor track record verification, and of course, hand-holding by my team, the SEF team. Our target market are not the big companies. Our loans are in the mid-sized companies, around 10 million pesos to around a few hundred. The few hundred pesos are on the big side already. Usually, we're at around 25 to 50 million pesos. Okay, so what are the three types of green projects that we finance? We have energy efficiency, we have renewable energy, and we have climate resilience, which covers green buildings. Remember, there is a new green building code in the country, so we are helping in helping developers. We're helping real estate developers be familiar with the code and comply with the code, other than helping chicken and pig farmers. As you know, there is a lot in the country, and we still do need food security. So these are the projects that we have today. We have a total in the pipeline, we have completed, a total of 267, 150 of which, as you can see, more than half are energy efficiency, because there is so much to be done on the energy efficiency side before we move to RE. So we have 150 energy efficiency, we have 20 solar, we have 2 wind. But this wind, so we have 39 biogas and biomass, and these geothermal projects are not under my team. These are under the bigger team, and always these big projects are more of project finance, including these hydro projects. Okay, so you're seeing here a total portfolio of BPI.
May I interrupt? Yes. When you speak of project finance, that does not include any collateral. Real estate collateral?
Yes.
None.
Yes, because this
project finance, there should be none, correct?
There should be none. Yes.
There should be none.
Unless there are special arrangements, but the plain vanilla setup does not.
Okay.
Yes. Now, but
you mentioned about SMEs are not considered project finance.
No, the ones that we help.
Yes.
No,
why should
the
SMEs be guaranteed by World Bank? I don't understand.
Okay, a lot of the SMEs do not have collateral to begin with. But they may have project proposals whom we evaluate for free, and then we see that there is something, there is value to it, and it will make money. But when they go to the bank, they have no real estate, as you were saying, they have no real estate collateral to offer the bank. So what we do is that we approach IFC, and well, it's already an arrangement. It's a partnership with them, whereby this IFC partnership provides for guarantees. 50% of the loan is guaranteed, and then the client who otherwise will not qualify to borrow from BPI can now qualify. So that's how we help.
IFC is a security.
IFC is the 50% guarantee.
IFC assumes 50% of the loan?
Yes. They guarantee. They do not assume. They guarantee 50% of the loan.
They guarantee.
Yes.
That is the BPI's partnership with IFC.
Yes.
And that's the same with World Bank.
IFC is the financial arm of the World Bank Group. So that's how
that's one and the same.
That's one and the same.
So that's your partnership with the World Bank, IFC.
Yes.
That 50% is guaranteed of the loan is guaranteed. The principal is guaranteed by them.
Correct.
I see. That's only with BPI.
May I know if IFC has new partners in the resharing facility,
This is
or it's still BPI? Because we were the first one.
This is for SMEs, but not for renewable energy.
Renewable energy is included. It's part of the portfolio.
IFC can also assume or guarantee 50% of the loans if it's RE. Even
Yes.
if it's not project finance. If it's not project finance.
Yes, and there are certain parameters. It cannot be more than 10 megawatts. It cannot. There's several other. Like now, it has to be distributed energy. It has to be verified by the technical consultants, covered by the technical and financial evaluation, which signifies and assures us that it is technically done right.
Sure.
So
I'm interested in what you said, distributed energy. For definition of terms, can you please define that? Because Secretary Kusi, in a policy statement, right? Maybe USEC Jess can tell us the policy of DOE insofar as distributed energy is concerned, and then Ms. Ayala can tell us your program or your definition of distributed energy. It's a new term to me. I want to be educated. Assuming it's new, maybe it's old. I just want to be sure we're understanding it correctly.
Well, today we have the national grid, which is both Luzon and Visayas are already connected on the backbone transmission. Mindanao is separate. When we talk of distributed electrification, we're talking about off-grid, which is now connected, we're in a mini grid or a micro grid will now connect different consumers within that, within that area that is outside of the main transmission grid.
That is, may I have a copy of the DOE policy? I know that Secretary Kusi, he mentioned, is it a department order, an admin order on renewable energy microgrids or distributed energy?
We still have to do the formal.
But he mentioned it to me. Was
yes,
it a policy
yes,
or just a thought, a concept?
No, it's a trust that we are now looking for, because he would like to see island provinces which are off-grid.
If I may suggest, not just island provinces, but even those in the mainland with expensive, unreliable power. Maski na sa mainland, mahal yung co-op, papuyak-puyak ang kuryente. You're hostage to a DU that does not provide power 24/7, and you pay 10, 15, 20 pesos per kilowatt, right? Per kilowatt banda. Yeah.
Hour, ma'am.
Kilowatt hour, right?
Yeah, I fully agree
Maganda.
with you.
So I agree with your, if hindi pa po tapos, if you can give us a copy when it's done, or even a draft, so we would understand the concept of distributed energy. So, we're on the same page. Para lang maintindihan ko, distributed energy simply means embedded generation. Solar, microgrids, nanogrids, microgrids, community-based embedded generation. Ganun po intindi ko.
Well, embedded generation is a own use type of electrification where the generation is done with on-site
Yes.
In other words, when you expand it further to connect it to the neighboring
Yes.
users, that would be the microgrid or a mini grid.
Yes. Okay, we're on the same page. And you're saying that is the vision that you're encouraging. Very good. Because that would really put resilience in the energy sector. Di mo nangyari sa Yolanda. Alam na there were warnings, but nobody heeded the warnings. And how can you, if there's a warning, what you do with the transmission lines which are so far? But if it was embedded or distributed energy, as you call it, perhaps not, hindi ilang buwan na walang kuryente, no? Because it's there. Is that what you're saying? It makes us more resilient. Even just recently, Bohol, or even later, right, with the earthquake, if it was embedded generation or distributed electricity, perhaps hindi matagal na brown out. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm with you there. And so, thank you for that.
I would like to, in fact, expand it further, because we are also encouraging mobile electricity resources, because during extreme weather events, where communities are taken away from whether it's a microgrid or the main grid, mobile electricity sources can also will be a very important response mechanism.
Sure. Thank you for that. So, distributed energy, embedded generation, microgrids, that's all within one family, correct? Yes. And I hope that there should be no regulatory measures. In short, huwag natin pinapahirapan ang komunidad. Mahihirap na nga, pipill up pa ng form, kailangan pa-check sa ARC. Huwag naman ganun, di ba? Huwag. Dapat yung inyong embedded generation or distributed energy, wala ng ERC. Kung gusto kong maglagay ng solar sa rooftop ko, kung malakas ang hangin ko, maglagay ako ng ganun, ERC pa. Masyado tayong nagre-regulate ang daming levels
Yes,
diba?
ma'am. We fully agree with you, because there is no power sale. That is because that's our own use or within the community.
Yes. But even within a community, assuming a community is a victim of an inefficient DU, and they want out of the co-op, and there's so many, like for example, in Palawan, kawawan mga tao, walang kuryente, and they don't want to be part of a co-op. They have a right to have their own microgrid, correct?
Fully agree with you, madam.
Paano po kung sabihin ng co-op, sakop namin kayo, hindi kayo pwede? Paano po yun?
Well, they
Anong
will
gagawin ng DOE?
Yeah, they will, either the DOE takes over the electric cooperative if they're mismanaged, or there is a waiver from the electric cooperative, or, as you correctly pointed out, if there's no other recourse, and that's the last resort, that the community chooses their own independent electrification.
Yes.
And, I would suppose
But can the community be sued by the DU because they're part of the franchise area of the co-op? But the co-op is inefficient. They're not serving or underserving the community.
Well, a DU, ma'am, is distribution, the generation portion.
The generation portion.
A community can choose its own generation source.
If both the generation and the distribution are inefficient, like Palawan, for example, and many areas, Masbate as another one.
Yes. Well, a community can choose.
Their own.
Yeah,
and the DOE will favor the community that chooses its own.
Yeah, because it's we have now retail competition open access, where consumers can choose their own resource.
So if a generator wants to help a community, but the co-op says you have to go through us, but going through the co-op entails so much red tape and inefficiency, and they're the reason for the lack of access to electricity of that community. That generator can actually talk directly to the barangay association or the community and have their own microgrid and go off and have that waiver from the co-op. Is that what I understand from you?
Yes, madam. I think that's a very good alternative.
Yes.
Because we cannot have communities being hostaged by...
They are hostage.
Yeah, precisely.
Barangay Sibaltan, Barangay San Fernando, even El Nido in Palawan, hostage. Masbate, hostage. Actually, look at our islands. You know it better, you're in DOE. They're hostage because of co-ops who say, oh, you're part of, even Occidental Mindoro. Talk to Government Jola and Kong Sato. Hostaged. Poor people.
They are not being only hostaged, but the general population also is asked to contribute.
Exactly.
Because of the universal charge
Yes.
missionary electrification,
Yes,
where
yes.
we, all of us,
Actually,
contribute.
if you allow the microgrids in the areas, then you solve the need for electricity of these communities as long as the co-ops do not oppose. So the DOE, that's where you can use your political will, your strength, to allow waivers in communities that wish to go on their own, who have the investors or their own pooled investments to have their own source of electricity, technology neutral.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. May we invite you? There's a meeting of the Energy Committee tomorrow, Wednesday, with the Paleco and the people of Palawan who've been suffering. Tomorrow, 3 o'clock. I'm not chairman of the Energy Committee. It's Senator Sherwin. But since you mentioned that and you're so convinced that's a way to go, and I agree with you, sir, could we invite you to that committee meeting here in the Senate, 3 p.m. po tomorrow, for the Palawan Electric Cooperative and the complaining community? Kung pwede po kayo.
Have the first organizational meeting of the Energy Investment Coordinating Council, which was created by the EO 30 tomorrow, ma'am.
I see. Okay, maybe someone who understands it the way you do to be represented, so that DOE can be represented.
We'll do that, ma'am.
Yes, thank. Or NEA, should it be NEA or you, or your office?
Yeah, we will have to
find out po.
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, with Senator Sherwin Gatchalian's committee, but I'll be there.
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you. Ms. Joy, you mentioned about distributed electricity. Yes, do you understand it the way we do?
Yes.
That's what you mean?
Yes.
Okay, we're on the
because,
same page.
You see, what if IFC provides guarantees given a select set of eligibility criteria, and we are on the third tranche, and this particular tranche has very specific requirements before I can tap the guarantee facility. So just to proceed, may I proceed, Ms. Senator? Okay, so to date, we have helped put together projects amounting to around 37 billion pesos, or saving something like 2.8 million metric tons of CO2. Or it's like planting 74 million trees, which I'd always like to imagine. Okay, this is the winning formula that we always present when we talk to the private sector. What we tell them is, you see, you need to comply to regulatory requirements. You want to help in employment. You have your own CSR obligations. You want to contribute to the community. You need to be climate resilient. Of course, you want to improve operational efficiency and be innovative. But at the end of the day, because you are a business entity, you need to be profitable. But what we espouse is profitability with a purpose, and we need you to be conscious of your contribution to the environment. And this is what the winning formula is for sustainability. You sustain your green projects. You sustain these green projects because on their own they are profitable. So the banks can lend to you even if the banks are private. So what we always tell our clients is, you don't just turn green, you have to be gold. You have to make money out of it, and you cannot be left behind. So just to mention the support needed by banks as my final slide. Private banks, as I mentioned earlier, do not have low-cost funding. It would help a lot for us to pursue climate finance, green finance, if we have low-cost funding. We need more grants for select green projects that, of course, we will verify first for technical viability. The guarantee programs are there thanks to IFC. USAID we have already fully utilized. we would appreciate, especially the presence of institutions here now who have access to funding, who can provide guarantees for us. And on the regulation side, you see there are no incentives for private banks to do this. I just happen to belong to the Ayala group, which is very conscious, but it would really be hard for a private bank to pursue green projects without incentives. And of course, if we can give incentives to the green project owners. So that's my presentation. Thank you.
Yes, just to Manny de Guzman and Red were pushing a note or giving me a note, but I said I answered it for them. I just wanted to clarify your question. Why don't you ask it yourself, Manny? He was asking me to ask you. Ask it yourself. What was that note all about? You said, why do you still require collateral even if there's a guarantee cover? Is that your question?
That actually it works as a replacement.
Correct.
Those,
that's what I said.
yes.
Di ba yun ang tanong ko?
Yes.
Yung IFC ang siyang 50% na guarantee yung kasi hindi kaya ng
yes.
ng,
sometimes it's a combination. I'm sorry, ma'am. But sometimes it's a combination.
That's good to have that. That's not just for SMEs, that's also for RE and everything.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, when we talk of SMEs, I mean green projects of SMEs.
Projects.
Yes,
correct.
Green projects of SMEs. And a lot of them needed this. In fact, with USAID, that's why we fully utilize it right away because, in fact, I like the limitation. You cannot lend to SMEs green SME projects in Manila, in Davao, in Cebu. So the minute I opened it up to the countryside, the take-up was so fast, we fully utilize it right away. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, BPI. We only have 3 more presentations, and now we proceed to listen to UNSCAP, Aneta Nikolova, who's going to share with us their program for the region, Asia Pacific. And by the way, let me thank you in advance for extending full support to the process in the Philippines for green banking and finance. Aneta?
Thank you very much, Commissioner Guzman. Actually, as I said, I'm very happy to be here, and it's my fortune because my director didn't manage to get to Philippines, though he had a ticket. He was sent to a very urgent and emergency meeting by our executive secretary. Since we are focusing a lot on the national activities in green banking, green financing, I think I will just try, maybe the full presentation will be provided to all participants, but because we don't have much time, I will try to be short. And just focus on a couple of slides which are important. This slide is very important to give you a picture of the global trends and global major agreements that we need to consider. As you've mentioned, Mr. Guzman, we have the Sendai framework, but we have the Agenda 2030, and we have the Paris Agreement, but we added also 2 other big agreements. Addis Ababa Action Agenda is more on financing, and then we have the New Urban Agenda, which is aligning climate and financing and 2030 together, because our region is basically the host of the most of the megacities, and is increasing the urbanization. Changing drastically. By 2050, we're expecting to have more than 2/3 of our population living in cities, which is going to affect us in many ways. A little bit on the 2030 agenda, because we cannot talk about climate change without looking at the 2030 agenda and the SDGs. SDG 13 is on climate action. It's basically focusing on the actionable part and leaving the studies and the forecasts to the UNFCCC. But in all the SDGs, the 17 are interlinked. They're indivisible. You cannot take action on any one of them without affecting the others. There should be a more holistic approach to it. And we have developed a methodology for integrated planning of the SDGs, and we are applying it for SDG 6, but it's applicable for all of them. The good news is that, and actually is making it more complicated for everyone, is that at every target level you have all the 3 dimensions more or less, maybe not equally, but they're interlinked with each other in every target. So that makes it very difficult when they started doing the indicators, how to develop these complex indicators that reflect the 3 dimensions. is very tough, and we're working with the NDG group to see how we can align this work in some countries. We're working actually in Sri Lanka with the Sustainable Development Roadmap together with the colleagues from UNDP and other UN agencies. So this is one of these webs we like to show the interlinkages between them. And it's very important to know that when we're taking climate action, as Senator Lugardo was mentioning, it's affecting poverty, it's affecting disaster risk response. It is also a chance to change the economic development in certain areas. So it's very, very touching on all our aspects of our life. Some very important facts and some of them you will recognize in Philippines as well, is that basically renewable energy proportion is increasing, and we hope this to be an upward trend, that we're not going to reach the ceiling. In this region we need more renewable energy, and we have the potential for that very, very much. Also, this is because the emissions are increasing in our region very exponentially. But we have also other aspects that are related to climate change as well. We have air pollution, and to our inefficient processes of life and economics. We have issues with water. The quality is deteriorating. That's because also the forest cover is deteriorating. We have some increase of forest cover, but these are commercial forests. They're not the biodiversity primary forests. And we also see that the emissions, as I said, are very per kilogram. We also are a very inefficient region. We have economic growth which is rampant, but we are not really using our resources properly. So we use more resources than any other region on the world per $1 US dollar produced. So we have huge challenges in our region, which we need to address, and working through the climate action is very important to unite ourselves. But when we look at the issues here, as you see, the total funds that are needed per year is 1 billion annually to be able to change at least the transport and to change a certain very key sectors where we have a lot of climate impact. And we also know that there are some facts about, sorry, I pressed the wrong button. Oh, I'm going backwards. Okay, sorry. We know that our region is very active with the nationally determined contributions. 39 Asia-Pacific countries have done that. Philippines is also doing that. And we have a lot of the sectors are being evaluated, which are the difficult sectors. Pledges are done, but it's all not enough. We need to do more. And as you see here on this graph, our region is really going up on its emissions, and it's very exponential as a whole. So this is kind of worrying, and this is per sub-region. What is what is going on in our sub-regions where we have the most, the north and east. This is like Korea, Japan, all these countries. The appetite there is very high. And North and Central Asia, this is because they are in very bad shape with their efficiency as well. Now, these graphs I want to show you is because the need for climate finance investment cannot be covered by public funds as well, only. That's not enough. Even if we have the GCF very actively supporting all the countries, developing countries, this is not enough. We need to find a way to actually bring more private funding. That is very important. You will see the share of private and the public. Most of the investments and the projections are that private sector will be a key player. Now, how to combine that, how to put it in a nice framework that there is benefit, but there is also distribution and social benefits that is not actually leading to exploitation. This is very important. It's a national matter, and each country needs to create the provisions for that. It is something that we could, as international organizations, we can only advise, provide technical advisory services and support for that. And what I wanted to show you, this is a very important slide. What we need to scale up the climate finance and engage all actors in it, number one thing is to improve the accountability. So also a lot of loans are given for climate, for low carbon development, for renewable energy, but there is not enough monitoring and there is not enough accountability. Sometimes it happens, like we've been in Sri Lanka, and we know from the GFCC, the Development Bank, that they give loans, but some of the loans don't go for the right thing, and there is not enough monitoring of it. So this is where a central authority in a country can set up a monitoring and evaluation assessment board or team of experts, and usually practice shows that central banks could be the ones to be supporting such activity. So these costs don't go to the loans, but they are covered by public funds. Because if these costs are covered by the bank, of the monitoring and evaluation assessment, then the loan costs will go up. And so then we need to also create a national environment. This is what I mean. Oh, sorry. We need to create this national environment. Sorry, what I did? I lost my slide. We need to create a national policy environment. We need to rethink our economics. All the economic models don't work anymore. I heard some very interesting concepts, like we have this ecosystems economics. That is the future of countries that still have your biodiversity, and you need to protect it, like for the Philippines, and that's your wealth. So you have to rethink your economic development. Green growth is an important one, and there is a playad of tools to rethink your economic traditional economics don't work anymore. They're in a shambles. Then also traditional economics, when we overhaul them, we need new financial instruments to create different types of investment, to create revolving funds that are putting profits, parts of the profits also back into the social development, the community development. And then everywhere we need to integrate the climate response in our financial systems. This is a must. We should not even think of a financial system at the national level existing without it. It's not possible anymore. There's a lot of opportunities for innovation. There's a lot of opportunities for that, but of course, and we are over this age when we were saying technologies are expensive. We should not think about that. There's a lot of more partnerships globally. Paris Agreement really stirred a lot of things in the right direction. And even without the US, we can do it, no problem. They are going to be the losers. Urbanization is a very important sector. We are very inefficient in our cities. In all areas, even waste could be energy. Water is 80% of the water, of the waste, domestic wastewater, is thrown without purification, and that is a resource actually. Basically, it could be energy generation. From that could be also fertilizers, natural fertilizers. After purification, of course, could be used very efficiently, but it's actually thrown in our resources of fresh water. So this is a crime to our own self, basically. Opportunities for green investment, of course, renewable energy, wastewater purification, which is climate impact as well, and which is also related to renewable energy opportunities. Waste management, solid waste management. These are very important areas because we see our fertile agricultural lands turned into garbage dumps, and that is not acceptable. This is food generation area. Yes, and so we need to do some reforms. ESCAP has opportunities to give technical assistance. We need to look into our enabling environments, into our taxation. We are still taxing the goods, and we are incentivizing and giving subsidies to the bads. That's not very, very good and not very economically efficient. We need to look at our grants, schemes, and technical assistance as well. And as I mentioned, the low carbon green growth has been already 11 years in our region. ESCA has been promoting it very actively. There's a lot of good tools. This is available online. This course we're still providing for free. And it's very interesting how to look at your visible structure, which is the infrastructure, and invisible structure is the financial systems, how to overhaul the old economic patterns and projections. And yes, and ESCA provides all this support. We are a regional commission. We can only work at the national level with our brothers, which are the UNDP offices, in the country's offices, but with our with the new reform that is looming now, I think there will be more opportunities for collaboration with the UNDP and with the country offices for doing and channeling all the backup knowledge products we have been developing. So we're looking for these partnerships to help you. But in this project, I have a presentation for the afternoon to talk about more concrete cases and good practices. You can find all this information on these websites. We also have the biggest SDG data repository in the region, which is available. Thank you very much. I was trying to be short and to give time for the others, which are more important.
Thank you, UNSCAP. For your information, we are developing a program to be able to receive your offer of support for the processes of strengthening climate finance and promoting green investment in the Philippines. So we're aware that you have a 3-year program in the region, and we look forward to working closely with you in this area, which you're providing focus. Thank you, Aneta. Now we immediately proceed to the penultimate presentation, which is on the Green Climate Fund Programs and Windows for Climate Finance by Dr. Jerry Velasquez, Director of Mitigation and Adaptation Division of Green Climate Fund Secretariat. Jerry, please.
Thank you very much, Secretary de Guzman. It was very interesting to hear some of the issues raised by our colleagues, especially from the private bank, because I think we have some answers for you. Yes. So maybe next slide. So as we know, the mandates given to us on green finance is one, a very strong country ownership, greening the financial sector, which ultimately we hope could help countries meet their national determined contributions. Next slide, please. So what are the things that we could do to help green the financial sector? If entities would like to apply for accreditation, that process in itself would help the entity. In this case, the Land Bank is one of those entities applying for this, already become green, because we have very strict requirements related to ESS and gender. Now, some entities have told us that this process, in fact, have made them review their ESS policies or help them develop gender policies. So by going through our accreditation, it helps the entity already become green. Our readiness programs and project preparation facilities, again, it could provide taking initiatives already that are happening in other countries, such as the green credit guidelines in China, the roadmap for sustainability finance in Indonesia. That could already be kind of piloted, tested, or looked upon as what could be possible in terms of applying it in a particular country, and we could provide funding to do that through the readiness program. That's $1 million per year. And that is requested directly by the country through the national designated authority. The project preparation facility is per project. We can provide financing up to $1.5 million for each project, and again, those could be used for pre-feasibility and feasibility studies, analysis, and so on, to make sure that it is a viable project. In addition, we do have 4 instruments. We do provide grants, we do provide concessional loans, equity, and guarantees. So in terms of the loans, I mean, the green credit lines, some of the entities that actually, for example, if Land Bank does become accredited, they could in fact require those lending the finance from them to also be green. So that actually multiplies the entities that actually become green in the Philippines. We do provide grants in itself for example, technical assistance, even to private sector. Technical components could be in grants, for example, on capacity building, ESS, gender mainstreaming. So those kind of things we can provide to you as grants. Equity. If you would like, to have enough equity to set up a green bank, we can provide such equity. So, for example, if you're thinking of an initial, I mean, there will be examples I'll be citing a bit later. So, if there could be, for example, initially you're setting up a green bank for initially capitalization of 3 billion, and you require $500 million from us, we could provide that kind of equity.
Can I just intervene? Is there any proposal for a unit of any bank in the Philippines applying for that yet? Wala pa, no?
Not yet. We hope that maybe through this there could be some interested entities could look into it.
The $20 million you're giving Land Bank as a grant, is that not as part of a green, that's only for green loans or green? Is that $20 million you mentioned earlier for Land
Madam
Bank?
Senator, it depends on the project that they submit, so it really depends on the kind of project
So
they
that's
submit.
different from the equity needed to set up a green bank.
Yeah, so if it is deemed a priority of the country, a project could be drafted, and I will outline the possible steps to do that with specific things that we could provide to support. So maybe next slide, please. So as you know, why green banks? It could crowd in private sector capital. You've been discussing this. Why to do this? Because you want to crowd in private sector capital. It could create green jobs. I think this is a priority for the country. It could create green jobs. It could also address market failures and barriers that prevents green investment. You've been discussing a lot of this. You pointed it out. A lot of issues related to you don't have enough capitalization, or maybe you have certain barriers. There's high risk. You've been discussing risks. For private sector to get involved, where we could take the risk. We are there to take the first risk. We are there to take loss. So that's our purpose. So use us for that purpose. Next slide, please. So what are the barriers? As you can see, you've noted all of this. I'm not going to list them, but maybe this could be listed to you, given to you. But all of the things that you've been telling, including price, policy, and all kinds of barriers, could be addressed to some of the things that a green bank could do. Yes, next slide, please. So there are a number of green banks in the world, none yet in a developing country. The Philippines could be the first, a leader in the world. So that's one thing that could be done, show the world that how it could be done. It could multiply the kind of investments that are happening. You've been stating that green finance is a barrier, and you said there's a lot of discussion that there needs to be green finance. Well, something like this could, if it happens, could provide that green finance. Next slide, please. So what are the kind of goals? So these are 3 examples. Australia, Clean Energy Finance Corporation. We are so fortunate that we have behind us there, observing the CEO who started this Green Energy Finance Corporation in Australia from the Macquarie Group, who eventually also acquired the UK Green Investment Bank. So they're one of the leaders in terms of green, but they're here in the back. Maybe you could stand up, please. Yes, so he's going to be there in the afternoon as well. If you have specific questions on how they did it, he's the CEO, former CEO of this bank, and so on. So next slide, please. So what are the 3 possible approaches that, if the Philippines is interested, could take on? And this is probably, you would have to decide depending on your situation. It could be legislated, as what Senator Ligardo was also originally thinking of doing. You could follow how the Australian Clean Energy Finance Corporation did, which is to create a legislative action that passed through Parliament that enabled to create that bank. Or it could be regulatory and administrative. New York chose to create a green bank as a division of an existing entity. So that's also possible. So from an existing entity, create through just administrative and regulatory rulings. So no need for legislation. Or repurpose an existing entity. In the case of Connecticut, the Connecticut Green Bank was formed from the Connecticut Green Energy Fund. So that's also possible. Next slide, please. So those are 3 possibilities. But as you know, the green investment model, so you need money in, money out. So what could happen is that it could be capitalized by public banks, private banks, GCF, and also public sector funds. So you could own shareholders in such an entity if you wish to do so. So if you, for example, want to create a new bank, capitalize the $3 to $4 or $5 billion, could be, multiple equity shareholders, public, private, government, and us together to do this. Again, you could define what kind of projects, but it would accelerate all of the things that you've been discussing here today. Next slide, please. So what are the impacts so far? These are the impacts so far that have actually been proven on these green banks. They've actually leveraged, this much investment, reduce emissions by this much. It works. So these kind of things works. So if it could be, done here, it would not only, accelerate the investment of private sector, it would accelerate your meeting your targets related to your NDC. Next slide. So what is it that we could do to help you if you're interested? These are 3 things we could do to help you. You could, if you're interested to start analysis and stakeholder engagement, we could provide you right now up to $1 million per year on readiness funding for analysis, stakeholder engagement, pre-feasibility, feasibility, by sector analysis, and so on. And that's available through the request of DENR as the national designated authority. If you need more extensive financing, up to $1.5 million available for project preparation facility. Again, we could provide that, and this will have to go through an accredited entity. So if you're going to do this, develop a project, you need to select an accredited entity. You have to decide if it's a public entity or a private entity. Private entity, we have IFC here. Public entity could be ADB or anything else like that. And if necessary, they could request project preparation. And so the first step could be done. So in establishment, again, if you need feasibility studies and things like this, we could provide project preparation facilities for this. And then finally, for operations, if you are going to set it up, as I've mentioned, we have 4 available financing grants. We can provide some grants if it is for technical assistance, even the private sector. So there's a limit of how much we can provide. We can provide very concessional loans, 0 interest loan, 40 years. I don't think you find anything cheaper than that, yes?
Again.
Yes. Those are for public sector. Those are for public sector. I think all the private sector are saying, 0%.
Okay,
no.
0 interest loans for 40 years.
For public sector.
For public sector.
That's a high concessionality, and then low concessionality is 20 years, 75
What's
BPs.
the minimum, what's the maximum for the 0 interest 40-year loan?
There is no limit.
No limit.
There's no limit, yes. So that's for the
Public sector meaning government.
Government.
Meaning a local government can borrow.
That means that if it's, because we have 2 ways of accessing, and at the moment we have basically 50-50 in our portfolio, private and public. So public is if it's requested through a public entity, private if it's requested to a private entity like a bank. At the moment we have banks like Japan Mitsubishi Bank, Deutsche Bank, and also for national entities, we have ZAC Bank in Mongolia, who is accredited, who has been accessing our financing.
If I were a local government and I want to access the 0 interest loan for sustainable development for this medium-sized province, does the LGU have to partner with, does it have to go through the NDA, DNR, or can it go straight to the GCF with an NIE like UNDP or IFC?
In the best case scenario, what we are promoting is that the country needs to develop a country program, setting the priorities of the country aligned with the national designate, the NDC. So if there is a plan up to 2030, and then out of that an action plan for 5 years, with a priority list of projects, all of government, and within that, for example, a compilation out of the, let's say, 1,000 submissions to the People Survival Fund, maybe 100 submissions, only 2 have approved, and then the 98 could be compiled by DILG and sent to us. That's a possible project. So there are many other possible projects, but what we hope is that it is through the country program, and we can only process projects as endorsed by the NDA, which is at the moment the Secretary of the DNR.
Public sector, local government, or government bureau or agency or institution, if it's a people's organization, if it's a farmers and fisher folks group, if it's an environmental NGO, it has to go through the NDA again, the DNR?
Yes, because we are centered on country ownership, and it is the designated authority of the government. At this state, it is designated by the president. So we file, and any project that is sent to us, yes. Even a concept note, if it is sent to us, we have to send a letter to the NDA saying that we've received this concept note. Is it aligned with the country priorities, and do you agree? And then a full project or a project preparation facility can only be reviewed by us if it is accompanied by a no objection letter by the NDA.
Okay. So the role and efficiency of the NDA is so important.
Yes, and obviously what we hope is that the Philippines would send us as many projects as you need. And it can only be approved positively by our board if they can see how it fits in the big jigsaw puzzle of your country priorities. So if you send us different projects and they cannot see how it fits, the sequencing of these projects, then they will actually ask too many questions. In an ideal case, you could send, since there's no limit, you can send us as much request as necessary. The only requirement is that you need a very strong and country-owned, country-centered country program.
Are you meeting with the NDA head, the newly appointed head, Yusek Te, who was only appointed yesterday?
We met with Secretary Simatu yesterday, including Yusek Te, and then Yusek Jonas also.
Do they
yesterday.
know already what to do? Or do we still have to meet together?
We can only provide technical advice, Senator, so once requested, we can provide any advice necessary.
Could I, na-stress naman ako. Kasi bago nakaka-stress. Kayong DNR, nakaka-stress talaga kayo. I take note that they're not here. Can I just have an excuse slip why Yusek Leones and Yusek Te are not here today when it's so important? DOE is here, and they're not even, well, they're directly impacted, but you're the NDA. I'm not saying that Director Domingo is not competent. Maybe, good, you're there. So, you know everything. But, you know, Anna and Jonas should have been here. But if that Davao trip and whatever trip was beforehand, but matagal na ito eh. Give it importance. So, because they're not here, Mr. Domingo and the two USECs should come to my office and give me a list of what you already have and what you plan to do. And who's your focal person in GCF. Because you just collapsed the whole GCF secretariat. These young kids who were trained in Incheon are good, but you did not absorb them. I don't know. With the change of person on top, you keep on changing and changing. Oh, what if your secretary is not confirmed? You will change them again? Sorry, I had to put that on record. Irritated with the slow pace. CABSEC office knows my frustrations. Could I request, since you're the CAB, to oversee, okay, because CABSEC has always, they're the guardian angels of the cabinet, and I'm the, They know, no, they know me. Because I just want speedy implementation. And it's such a waste. And I envy other countries that have already applied and accessed. And here we are, we need it most, and we're still organizing. From CCCOM to DNR, former secretary, new secretary, and the two new USECs. The two USECs are not here. So I'll request Dr. Cruzada to be the guardian angel of a DNR GCF group to shepherd it and have direct connection with Dr. Jerry, Mr. Park, and everyone here. And just let me know all the time. Whether I respond or not to your calls or emails, just get it done. I want to see as many proposals. And then let's meet this week with the two USECs. Okay. Sorry, I just had to say it. Because we keep on changing. And this is the last change, I hope, huh? Yes. I'm sorry, Eva's going to say something, then Jerry will continue.
Senator, we're planning to meet with them this week, and then Secman and I already talked yesterday that we will be holding small group meetings because there were presentations yesterday that Dr. Jerry said are probable projects that could be improved for the listing.
I
We
have
will
a
be coming
suggestion.
up with
Yes,
the
sorry
list.
to interrupt. all of those who applied in the PSF but have not yet been considered or did not win, were not awarded, ibigay nyo. Ganito. Pangalawa, lahat ng Tier 2 sa lahat ng departamento, kasama si Climate, paborito ko to si Alice, nakangiti palagi. Lahat ng Tier 2 na hindi nasama sa GAA na related sa climate, ibigay na rin nyo. Ganun. Yung hindi ko kayang i-fund sa GAA, even sa DOE, ibigay nyo sa kanila. Yun, ang dami na. Tapos, yung mga CLAD awards, 3 commissioner, yung mga nag-apply sa CLAD, what do you call it? Tas ilan ang nanalo ng CLAD awards? No, all the CLAD awardees, the climate change awardees, all of those who presented but did not win, all of those PSF proposals but were not yet granted, even those granted, that means nag-vetting process, si Surigao, si Carmen, Del Carmen, si ganito, ibig sabihin, magaling, di bigyan pa, sige, i-apply nyo lahat. So, you don't have to search for projects, and all the Tier 2, Tier 3 of all departments that were slashed by DBM, give it to Mr. Domingo. You'll have a lot of work with me, Mr. Domingo. Okay, sige. And be fast, make sure you have a good team. Sige, Jerry. Thanks.
Just wanted to add in the last portion, number 3, we could, because it was mentioned by BPI that you wanted guarantees, we could provide guarantees, we could also provide equity. And if BPI gets accredited, the project could be routed through them. So even better. So maybe...
Accreditation, you mean Land Bank and others can be accredited?
Land Bank is public, so the project that goes to Land Bank is public sector through me. But BPI, if BPI gets accredited, it will be private sector through Leo.
I see. Okay. Jerry, Dr. Velasquez takes care of public sector and Mr. Park private sector. And Land Bank is the NIE only for public sector, and there should be an accredited private sector. Is that correct? And there's no application yet for any private sector.
Madam Senator, we are also prioritizing in the next 5 months for entities in Asia to be accredited. So if the government would like to nominate at least one private sector
so
entity,
we need to have a private sector NIE. Otherwise, the private sector cannot access the GCF. Is that accurate?
Just to clarify, I mean, we can still do it with the Land Bank. For example, we can give loans to Land Bank in which they can then on-lend to private sector banks.
They can.
So that's a possibility. But of course, I think it will be good for countries to have both private and public sector entities.
Sure, and there's no limit to the
GCF.
number of NIEs. Okay. Thank you.
Your presentation.
You should treat them for lunch.
Okay. There is there's lunch, and we'll have the break until 1:30. Now it's 12:35.
Ito naman ang morning session. We're done with
This is the morning session. Now maybe in the program we close with the 2 messages from maybe from DNR. From Central Bank and also from DOF. Brief message, closing message.
Pakain mo na lang muna yung message ni...
Ha? Kayo raw nag-require kasi ng kanilang present.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Yes, okay.
Okay. In the interest of time, anyway, we've been discussing GCF as a whole, no? I'll go directly to where we are right now. Ma'am, as it is, what we have done is that we're dealing with 2 tracks at the same time. One is the preparedness, no? And the other one that you were asking earlier to the GCF, the actual submission of a project. I'll deal with it very briefly, no? It's not.
They were invited.
Okay. It's not. Okay. Okay. It was already confirmed earlier that the DNR is now the NDA. So I'll just go to the 2 slides. No. Ma'am, we are in the, this is the component as far as the preparedness is concerned. So luckily we have some money through UNDP from BMU IKI, and we have engaged already 3 organizations for the preparedness thing. One is, if you will see that the WRI, as far as component 1 is concerned, UNDP as far as the output 2 is concerned, and UNEP as far as UNEP 3 is concerned. So there are parallel tracks that are ongoing right now at the high level, meaning to say dealing with the secretary himself, the USEC, but at the same time, the various organizations involved has also been dispatching to us technical people that are working on the details of the project implementation. So these are simultaneous tracks that are ongoing right now. No? The other one, Madam Senator, no, is the project that was mentioned earlier on the bamboo and mangrove. But what has happened was that it has been endorsed to the UNDP, and we are working through the engagement of consultants right now to prepare the concept paper, the project feasibility, and the full document. As you have rightly mentioned earlier, no, and as per discussion with the GCF themselves, no, just preparing a project purely on planting bamboos and mangroves will not sell. So we are working now in a revised proposal that will look at the total coastal community resiliency component, of which the actual planting of bamboos and mangroves will just be a component to the totality of the project. So we are expecting the engagement of consultants anytime soon. We're getting some experts from the regional office within the month, and we have mobilized the whole team, ma'am, targeting November for us to be able to complete the final documents for submission. So these are both ongoing right now. Okay. Ma'am, as I was saying, itong project proposal, no, is not something that is just limited to just planting. It will not, as I've said, it will not sell. This is now packaged as a coastal resilience approach, no, for coastal communities, which includes the planting of bamboos and mangroves as just a component of the whole thing. It will now also involve DRR component and the subsidiary livelihood projects. And as I've said, our timetable right now is to be able to come up with the various documents by November of this year. Tito, would you like to add?
Okay, thank you, DNR. Maybe, well, lunch is being served already. Just to formally close our morning session, maybe we can hear from the Department of Finance, and then followed by the Central Bank. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very briefly, on behalf of Secretary Dominguez and National Treasurer Lea De Leon, we would like to commend the CCC and the Office of Senator Lauren Legarda for holding the high-level roundtable discussion on green finance. We echo the call of the chairs for the urgency on the matter of green financing, and we hope for sooner implementation of these key initiatives. As per today's directive, We will be maximizing available sources for green financing. We will be sending over the inventory as requested by the good senator. We have pre-identified 7 sources on the international front, about $561 million that are available for tapping by the Philippines. So we will send that information across, and then we look forward to working with various public, like the DNR, the BSP here, and the private sector stakeholders for inclusive and sustainable financing. Very quickly, one thing that was not discussed here, another option for climate finance is the green bond space. You know, this is a multi-billion-dollar industry already. Wherein private and supranationals have been tapping globally. So that is one space that the Philippines can actually take advantage of. In fact, one corporate, Aboitiz Power, has already tapped the international capital markets for green bond funding. The government is as well looking at it, at this stage, just to be able to make sure that our commitments in this climate funding and initiatives are in place. So with that, again, thank you very much, and have a good day to all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Santa Ana of the Department of Finance. Now, maybe hear the message of the Central Bank, Ms. Chuchi Fonosier, Deputy Governor of BSP.
Yeah. Thank you, Commissioner. On behalf of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, or the BSP Governor Nestor A. Espinilla Jr., we thank you also for this opportunity for the BSP to provide our perspective during this high-level roundtable. So on the part of the BSP, we really took careful, deliberate steps to fully understand green finance, particularly the environmental and social governance, or the ESG principles, and of course, the environmental and social risk management tools. So we became, meaning the BSC became a member of the Sustainable Banking Network, or the SBN, with support from the International Finance Corporation, or the IFC. SBN is a peer learning network of banking regulators, industry associations, and ESG specialists. And through the SBN, the BSP learned how central banks from other countries approach the ESG and the ESRM. For example, some took leadership role by issuing green finance regulations outright, but others also allowed the banking industry itself to develop their own guidelines. So while others supported environmental or environment ministries, public and private sectors to implement holistic roadmaps. So approaches actually vary depending on the country context. So to determine the best possible approach for the Philippines, the BSP with IFC support conducted a research in 2015 on the extent of banks' experience and interest in sustainable finance practices like the ESG and the ESRM. And results showed moderate awareness. So very limited experience and mixed perceptions about the business case of ESG and ESRM adoption. But of course, we were happy to hear from the side of BPI embarking on this matter already, Mr. Commissioner. And so the study pointed actually to 2 critical factors necessary to scale up green financing in the country. And, of course, encourage banks to influence their client firms to be environment-friendly. And the first of that critical factor is that banks need to increase awareness on ESG principles and build institutional capacity to assess the risks in financing or investing in green projects. And second, banks need to see compelling financial viability and attractive risk-return profiles of green projects, as what was also pointed out by BPI, which we do really agree on the side of the private institutions. This is really very critical indeed on the viability side. So to address the first factor that we mentioned on the awareness, capacity building, that's capacity building. So the BSP currently is working with the IFC to raise industry awareness and improve banks' competencies in green finance. And just this June of this year, actually, just this June, Mr. Commissioner, representatives from the BSP, the Bankers Association of the Philippines, or the BAP, the Bankers Institute of the Philippines, and the BIFIL visited the Mongolian Bankers Association and the Central Bank of Mongolia to learn more about their industry-led approach to green finance. So under the BSP-IFC partnership, other capacity building activities for industry players as well as BSP supervisors will be undertaken in the near future. So the ultimate objective is to encourage more banks to green their portfolios. So in this area, the BSP remains mindful that the Philippine banking sector consists of big and small banks with varied capacities, business models, and risk appetites. So some banks will simply not have enough capacity and resources to deal with green finance standards. But some others will see value and opportunity like what BPI has actually did. And these banks will benefit from capacity building support. Now to address the second factor, which is the making the risk-return profile of green investments attractive, the BSP sees the need for concerted public and private sector action in this matter. So we recognize the truth cited and also in the UN paper that central banks are not necessarily best positioned to influence green investment outcomes. But in the Philippines, the BSP is only one among a set of institutions that can do so. So some other institutions hold granular information that can make it easier for banks to assess the risk-return profiles of green projects. But others have the mandate to prohibit or strictly regulate activities that harm the environment. So in this regard, Mr. Commissioner, we're glad to be part of this conversation. So environmental sustainability and climate change risk resiliency are multifaceted objectives affected by multidimensional factors. So bank financing or the issuance of green regulations on their own would not be suffice to drive the Philippines' transformation into a green economy, but the BSP believes that we can all work together towards this objective. So this roundtable signals the beginning of deeper consultative dialogues that can lead to finding solutions together. And we all have a shared responsibility to pursue environmental sustainability and resiliency to climate change. And with this, Mr. Commissioner, we're happy to, of course, discuss with other partners. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Central Bank Deputy Governor. As we close this high-level roundtable, allow me to thank Senator Lauren Legarda for co-convening this dialogue, and I would like to ask everyone to give a big round of applause to all our resource persons coming, including those who came from abroad, and let's all thank all those who have made this dialogue meaningful and actionable, and also